Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a player of League of Legends. Meet Naruto Uzumaki, a not-so-regular teen with a passion for the MOBA game League of Legends even though he sucked at it. His life was normal until he was introduced to the supernatural world and found out he had an irregular sacred gear. So, the problem? How should he fend off Amano Yuuma? With Lucian's relic pistols? There are so many choices. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 24. You are Office? Naruto repeated, looking at the girl whose voice was just as cute as she was, but he did not disregard the fact that she just casually claimed herself to be the one of most powerful beings in the whole world, and the leader of the terrorist organization Chaos Brigade. You don't look like a dragon. He then stated, locking his eyes with hers as she started back at him rather inquisitively, her head tilting to the side in a curious, but incredibly cute manner. It was then that Naruto realized she was suppressing her own power, or someone else was doing it for her with Valley and his team, probably to not alert Rias and the others, especially Azazel, of their presences. Now that she was almost right next to him, he could feel a considerable amount of power radiating from her, and it was also incredibly terrifying. Is it because Office-chan is too cute, Naya? Asked the cat girl in a playful manner, but Naruto chose to ignore her and waited patiently for Office to give a response to his statement. Should he try to alert his champions so one of them could contact Azazel and the others to alert them? Yumi was with Asia, so she was the most obvious choice, but for some reason, he had a feeling that it wouldn't work. While he knew he could still summon them because the runes were still glowing, he could not feel any of their presences in the telepathic links that he had with them. I can appear in any form that I want. It doesn't matter. So, she's a shapeshifter, Naruto concluded, but he couldn't help but wonder what caused her to take on the form of a harmless-looking gothic loli with an abnormal level of power. Maybe an old-fashioned magazine, or something similar. You are the one who summoned the vast power I had felt in the dimensional gap months ago, the power that is known as Aurelian Soul. Yeah, the Star Forger? I used him to scare the shit out of Razor Phoenix and break his will to fight. What about it? Office then nodded her head before answering, if you are able to summon such powers at your whim, then you are strong enough to help me kick Great Red out of my home. Excuse me, but who's Great Red? He couldn't help but ask. Pretty sure that he had heard or read about that name somewhere before. Great Red is the most powerful being alive, a dragon whose power even exceeds my own. He goes by many titles: Apocalypse Dragon, the True Red Dragon God Emperor, True Dragon, and the Dragon of Dragons, the Dragon of Dragons. The list goes on. It is boring. Naruto's sweat dropped at that. He has been a thorn in my side for many years. He currently resides within the dimensional gap, which is originally my home for as long as I have existed, until one day Great Red barged in and kicked me out. Just like that? Just like that. Office answered simply while nodding her head in confirmation. I want you to help me kick him out. I don't care how. I have been gathering strong people from every race, humans, yokai, devils and dragons in order to accomplish my goal, but so far nothing worked but you. She pointed her hand at him. You can help me with it. Aurelian Soul's power exceeded even that of Great Red. I don't care how you deal with him, I just want him gone. I don't want him in my home anymore. So basically, you created a group of terrorists who threaten world peace just for that? Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow at the dragon girl. I don't care what they do, as long as they help me achieve my goal, then yes, I will continue to support them. I want to return back to my solitude, to my silence. Office stated emotionless, and Naruto couldn't help but stare at the girl. Contrary to what he had imagined her to be, she didn't look like a bad person or dragon at all. She's just someone who's trying to return to her home, but as far as he could tell, the dimensional gap was an empty space of nothingness, and nothingness was far from anything that could be called a decent home. Did the dragon girl really want to be alone? Why would anyone want to be alone in such manner? So, you want to be alone, is what you are saying? Naruto asked before adding, no one likes to be alone, you know. I do. You are a weird dragon. Call me however you want. Are you going to help me or not? Ophice pressed on, though her tone was as calm and as emotionless as ever. What make you think that I will help you? Naruto cocked an eyebrow and decided to ask. I can always force you to help me. Yup, that was as much as he had expected, but Naruto remained calm. You know that I'm stronger than you with Aurelian Soul, right? Naruto asked, once again playing the A-Soul card. No one needed to know that he and that overgrown space dog did not get along, and he would rather summon fiddlesticks than a dragon that could blow up his whole planet with just a single breath of it, and then reform it with his power just to blow it up again. Ophice, Valley and his team seemed to think that he had full control over his champions, so let play that to his advantage. We can really fight it out here and see if you really can force me to do your bidding, but a battle of that scale will reduce everything around us to ash in a matter of seconds, my friends included. And once that happened, I promise you, Ophice, you won't even exist to return to that home of yours. He finished, his tone deadly calm as he stared right back at Ophice's eyes. Around him, he could see Valley and his team becoming alerted at the amount of power he was unleashing. Even the cat girl had dropped the playful smile on her face and sat up, dangling her legs down the billboard box. That's the reason why I am here to ask you politely. Ophice said finally, not even looking like that she felt threatened by his words. If you refuse to help me, then I will have to stick with the people that I have gathered. The Cows Brigade. Naruto nodded his head in understanding before exhaling through his mouth, letting go of a breath that he didn't know he was holding. Ophice did not look like she was here to fight him, which was a good thing because he did not know if he could fight her and Valley at the same time, not to mention that there were also his friends and thousands of innocent people around. And that's when it hit him. A brilliant idea that popped into his mind. He didn't know if it was a stupid or a good idea, but it was an idea no less that would let him gain a huge advantage in the battle ahead for the Alliance. Plus, he also wanted to help this poor girl, who didn't seem to know what it meant to be truly alive, and to live a life of excitement and happiness around the people that cared for you. Why don't you like it here? Is it too loud? Naruto asked. Beside him, Valley and his team seemed to have realized the direction he was heading, but they did not try to stop him. Yes and no. I don't mind it here, but I was born from the void of nothingness, and so the dimension gap is the most comforting place to me. Ophice answered simply. Then what happens if I show you that there is more to life than simply existing in a void? He asked, smiling finally. Do you have a friend, Ophice? Friend? Ophice repeated the word and looked around. Does a talking partner like Valley count as a friend? Kuroka also talks to me a lot too. A talking partner? He looked over at the White Dragon Emperor, who gave him a simple shrug in response. I guess yes, they are friends of yours, but friends can be much more than that. Friends are people who always stay with each other and support each other in every way they can. The rest of the Cows Brigade are not your friends, aren't they? Thinking about his words, Ophice then shook her head in confirmation, making the smile on his face become brighter. Great, then why don't you just ditch them and come with me? I will become your friend Ophice, a friend that will show you the excitement of living in this world. Excitement? Ophice asked, tilting her head to the side in curiosity. She looked intrigued by the words. Yeah, excitement. Fun. Whatever you like to call it. Naruto nodded his head with a grin. Come with me, and I will show you the meaning of living in a world full of excitement, and one of nothingness is nothing but boredom. Ophice made a sound, as if she was really considering it. Oh no, the big bad bosses are not gonna like this Naya. Kuroka giggled at how the situation had turned out. You do realize that if she agrees to come with you, you will have the entire organization coming after you, right Naya? Yes, but I have a feeling that you guys really don't need this girl more than just a battery of power-ups, do you? He asked, narrowing his eyes at Kuroka as he remembered Kateria and the snake she had used to empower herself. So what do you say, Ophis? Will you come with me and become my friend? He asked and extended his hand forward to her, making the dragon girl widen her eyes a little. If I end up not being able to make you see this world as a place worth living, then I promise you I will help you deal with Great Red. Promise? Her head perked up at that, looking less emotionless than before with a small but blank smile on her face. Yes, promise. Naruto smiled, and slowly but surely, Ophis reached out and placed a hand on his, allowing Naruto to grab it gently before lowering it down, allowing the blonde to let out a long breath he did not know he was holding. He really did not expect that he would be able to convince her to come with him so easily, but it appeared that she was just that pure and innocent dragon girl. No one has ever held my hand before, Ophis suddenly said, as she leaned a bit toward him. Naruto couldn't help but ask as he started to get a little worried again. You don't like it? No, it's just, it feels nice, she said slowly while looking up at him. Your hand is warm. Thank you. Naruto chuckled sheepishly while scratching the back of his head before he looked at Valley, who looked surprisingly pleased at the development, while Arthur just looked as calm and stoic as before. What about you, Valley? Wanna come with her and switch to our side too? I promise you that if you join us, I will fight you at least once a week. I am in dire need of a sparring partner too, you see, the blonde offered with a small smile. You are not going to ask why we didn't try to stop her from coming with you, Naruto-san? The look on your face is more than enough of an answer to me. You might be a battle maniac, but you are not a bad person. Naruto shrugged. So, about my offer. Come with me, Valley. Ophis suddenly spoke up, much to Naruto's surprise. If a talking partner counts as a friend, then you are my friends too, and friends must always stay with each other. She raised her other hand up and repeated the words Naruto had told her cutely. Valley didn't look surprised by her words one bit. If anything, he looked like he was expecting it. I don't have a problem. Our alliance has always been with Lady Ophis to begin with. Arthur shook his head and stated calmly as Valley looked thoughtful for a second, but it appeared that he had already made up his mind. But the final decision is yours, wherever you go, Valley, my sister, and I will follow. Eh? Do we really have to, Naya? Kuroko whined in a playful manner, but Naruto had spent enough time with Yumi to know that the way her cat ears were twitching showed that she was quite displeased. I mean, I don't mind a reunion with my cute Chiron-chan, but I'm still an SS-class criminal of the underworld, you know, Naya. Those scary devils will eliminate me on sight. Do you want to come with us or not? Valley asked her, and that was also the answer that he had for Naruto. Who is Chiron? Naruto wondered out loud before he could stop himself. Drake. Rias Gremory still couldn't quite believe the circumstance that had led her servants to this situation. When Naruto said that he needed to go to the restroom after parting with her cousin Sararog and his queen Kisha, who had taken a taxi and left for their hotel, she had fully expected him to return in 2 minutes or so. When Kiba and Azazel returned telling her that Naruto was right behind them, she had borrowed Asia, Zenobia and Irina's guidebook and checked to see if there's any romantic location for a date with him, but after another 10 minutes of not hearing anything from him, she began to get worried and were about to send everyone out to go look for Naruto, only for him to show up with the people she would never think that she would see that day even in her wildest dream. Guys, this is Ophis. It was the simple introduction Naruto had made while gesturing his hand to the girl who had appeared with him, while holding his hand, while being followed by Valley and a group of people, one of them being none other than Kuroka, Kaniko's elder sister, and one of the most wanted criminals of the underworld. Azazel had choked on his own coffee and spitted it all out in a spray upon seeing Valley, and knowing the girl that was holding Naruto's hand was the Ouroboros dragon Ophis, and Rias knew she would have had the same reaction if she had been drinking something like him. So there they were, sitting together in an airport's cafe. On one side of the table was herself, Akino, and Kaniko, who was trying to avoid her sister's playful gaze. From the other side of the table, where she was sitting with Arthur Pendragon, Biko, the descendant of the original Sun Wukong, who had arrived just a moment ago and joined in with his group, and a young woman who had shoulder-length blonde hair and blue eyes, wearing a sorceress-like dress going by the name Luffy Pendragon, the younger sister of Arthur and the descendant of legendary Morgan Le Fay and King Arthur, appearing to be the one who had stopped Naruto from contacting them and shielding their presences away from her and the others with her magic. Valet and Azazel were sitting at their own table and engaging in a friendly conversation, with the governor looking extremely excited and enthusiastic, like a man who was talking to his longtime friend and not someone who had just betrayed him not even a month ago. Her servants were sitting at their own tables behind her, looking wary but ready to step in if something happened. And at the head of her table, acting as a mediator, were none other than her boyfriend Naruto and the Ouroboros dragon god Ophis, who had not let go of his hand even while she was studying the menu. "Naruto, can I talk to you for a second?" she requested, looking over at her boyfriend before adding in private if possible. "Of course." The blonde nodded his head, and then looked over at Ophis. "Ophis, I need to go for a bit. Can you, let go of my hand?" "Sure." Ophis nodded her hand and did so, allowing Naruto to stand up and leave with Rias. After a moment, she then turned back to the menu on the table in front of her, but found herself looking back at the hand that had held on Naruto's for so long, feeling a strange emptiness, and she didn't like it one bit. "So, what's up, Rias?" Naruto asked once he and Rias had gotten outside the cafe. "What's up? What's up? Seriously, Naruto?" she asked in disbelief, hitting him lightly on the chest with the back of her hand. "I took my eyes off you for a few minutes, and you suddenly came back with a group of terrorists and their boss. Hey, they are not that bad." Naruto chuckled as he tried to explain to his girlfriend Valet, and the others are members of the Chaos Brigade, but unlike the Devil and Hero factions their alliance are with Ophis, and just so you know she's not as bad as you think she is. He then went on to explain to Rias about Ophis' ambition, including the fact that the terrorists of Chaos Brigade were just using her to have her in order to gain the power that they needed to fulfill their intention, meaning that having her on their sides would cut them off with an immense source of power. "I see, that makes sense." Rias nodded her head in understanding. Her expression then shifted to one that was much more serious. "But what about her?" she asked, jerking her head at the lounging Kuroka, who were cheerfully asking Kaneko a whole lot of questions but none were being answered. "Why is she here?" Because Kuroka is with Valet, I guess." "You know that's not what I meant, Naruto. Yasuo is a wanted criminal too, and he's currently in our house doing the gardening and having tea party with Dad in the weekend." Naruto shrugged as he looked at his girlfriend directly in the eyes. "When I tried to ask her, she refused to tell me what truly happened between her and that high-class devil master that she killed, but I couldn't help but have a feeling there's much more than just her doing so out of cold blood and while being drunk of her own power. Even if you are right, Naruto, it doesn't change the fact that she's a stray and the heir of the Yagars is here, in Iceland with us." Rias reasoned. "It's just that she didn't trust his judgment. She just didn't want him to get hurt because of it. What do you think she will do when she finds out that the most wanted criminal of the underworld is somewhere near?" "I know, Seek Vera. We are childhood friends. If she doesn't give a hunting order, she will do so herself, you know." Naruto nodded his head in understanding. He had thought of that too. "I will worry about that later, but for the time being, the benefits of having them on our side outshadow their criminal histories. Chaos Brigade is the only thing that is left in our way to world peace, and having them feeding us the information might be just what we need to defeat them in the near future. I still think it's a bad idea, but I will trust you, Naruto." Rias smiled finally. "Thanks, Rias." Naruto grinned at her before he said, "Let's head back in before Ophis thinks that I abandon her." And with that said, the two of them headed back into the cafe, where everyone had ordered their drinks and were chatting cautiously with each other. Luffy seemed to be getting along well with Akino, the girl reminding him a little about Irina, cheerful and enthusiastic with an outgoing personality but extremely polite tongue. Since you guys are already here, and if you don't have anywhere to go for the time being," Naruto began as he returned to his seat next to Ophis, who were drinking a cup of lemonade, and allowed her to immediately reeling her hand with his much to Rias's displeasure, something that was slightly shared by some other girls. Why don't you stay and watch the MSI with us? Do any of you know what it is? Biko and Arthur just looked at each other, obviously having an idea, but basically did not know what it was. Figure for the guy who can bring League of Legends' characters to life to want to see its second largest international event of the year. Kuroka teased playfully as her kimono parted to reveal her insatiable bust. Yes, we do know what it is, Naya. That's right, Naruto-sama. Me and Kuroka-sama play ranked duo a lot in our free times. It's a very fun game when you can play with your friends. Luffy chirped excitedly. So, is there by any chance that you two are Black at 1123 and Pendragon-chan? Naruto blurted out before he could stop himself. Still, a girl with the last name Pendragon playing the game with a black cat Nekishu, who talked just like Black at 1123, was too much of a coincidence for Naruto to not come to the conclusion that they were the duo that he usually met in rank. Yes, how do you know that, Naya? Kuroka asked in surprise after exchanging a look with Luffy. He's 7th Shadow 9. Surprisingly, it was Kaneko who answered that question, causing Luffy to drop her cup of water and stare at him with her jaw dropping. Kuroka, who had an expression of utter shock on her face, could only turn her head between Naruto and her sister a couple of times, before she broke out in laughter while holding her stomach, laughing so hard while slamming her fist on the table so violently that it's a miracle her enormous breasts did not fall out of her loose kimono. Holy fuck. Kuroka laughed, unable to control herself and actually rolling down laughing, making everyone look at her. You're that fucking shithead who went everyone's game, and was hard-stuck bronze eye for 11 fucking years. Fucking hell. And your power are league-based. How irony is that? Beside her, Luffy was also trying to control her laughter, her body shaking while she was hiding her smile behind her hand as she looked away from him. Grhh. Naruto growled in annoyance as he crossed his arms on his chest and lowered his chin down the table. Office, who sat next to him, just placed a hand on his back as if she wanted to comfort him, but only because he looked like he needed it, as she didn't understand why Kuroka and Luffy were laughing. Maybe Rias was right. This was a bad idea. Chapter 25. It was almost midnight, but the wet slap of flesh on flesh continued to echo in their luxurious hotel room as Naruto drove his hips into his girlfriend's cushioned, but meat, having her pinned beneath him as he fucked her in a lewd flatiron position, one arm supporting himself on one elbow, while the other were holding a fistful of her crimson hair with, making her squeal and arch her back to stick her ass up toward him. Her sexy, creamy rump jiggled and bounced and clapped against him, spreading and deforming beautifully as he stretched out her tight, warm asshole. Phew-uck. It's so good. Rias wailed, her large, round tits pillowing beneath her body, and spreading out to the side as her eyes rolled back, tongue flopping out as Naruto pummeled her asshole with his dick, making her come and clench down hard on him. Tightening his grip on her even further, Naruto began to pick up the pace, his hips thrusting so hard that the whole bed was really shaking and slamming against the wall as his pillar of meat jackhammered in and out of her pussy. The pounding drove the air from the crimson hair princess lungs, leaving her only able to gasp, pant and grunt as she was rutted like an animal. Not that she ever cared about their status, but it was time like this that made her feel like she was the servant, and he was the master who could fuck her however he wanted, and that thought just turned her on so much. I'm gonna come, Rias. Naruto groaned as his hip thundered down Rias' ass at a quick, erratic pace, his cock swelling for release. The crimson-haired girl could only wail weakly in response, before Naruto slammed himself down, causing her to moan out with primal delight, and then unloaded a tidal wave of hot spunk into her asshole. Rias' eyes rolled back into her skull as she came her own mind-blowing orgasm, her tongue lolling about limply, squealing and wailing weakly, feeling only bliss while Naruto continued to send his sloshing seed into her until finally, with a long groan of relief, the blonde's climax finally tapered off, leaving Naruto to fall down on Rias' body. Panting, Naruto rested his head beside his girlfriend while lying on top of her much softer, voluptuous one, his cock still lodged deep inside her asshole as the two slowly recovered from their mind-blowing fuck session together. He laid there for a whole minute to catch his breath, before rolling to the side, causing his semi-hard dong to slip out of her asshole, grinning at his girlfriend who lifted her head up to look at him. Just when he was about to ask her if she wanted to continue or call it a day and go to sleep, because they had a lot of touring plans tomorrow, Naruto heard the sound of someone knocking their hand on the door of the room, just about the same time Ria's phone went off. Talk about timing. The blonde chuckled in amusement, making Rias giggle softly before they got off, with Naruto hurriedly putting a pair of shorts and throwing a shirt on to go answer the door while Rias went to pick her phone up and returned to the bed to answer it. I'm coming, he responded when the person knocked again in a rather impatient manner. Who could have come at this time of night? Naruto couldn't help but wonder. Good evening. At first, Naruto didn't see anyone at first as he cracked open the odor to see who it was, making him feel a little confused for a split second. However, when the blonde looked down, he saw that the person who had come knocking on his room was none other than the Ouroboros dragon god Ophis, standing there with a piece of paper in her hand, wearing an insanely and adoringly cute dark purple pajama. Since she was staying in a room with Kuroka and Luffy, he had a feeling that the pajama was the playful Nekishu idea, as it was hard to think that Ophis would bother wearing anything other than her gothic dress. Is there a problem, Ophis? How can I help you? Pressure like nothing Naruto had ever felt before slammed into Naruto, pushing him down without warning, making him lose most of his strength and almost crumple to the floor, but still found himself struggling to keep himself on his feet. Then suddenly, it ended. What the? Naruto asked breathlessly, feeling his heart thundering in his chest at the possibly most scary feeling he had ever felt in his life. Since he could hear Rias talking to the person on the phone without a pause, it looked like she wasn't affected, or at least, Ophis had directed her power onto him only. Are you scared? Ophis asked in that monotone of her, and Naruto nervously nodded his head in response. She didn't look like she was angry or anything like that, but he had only known her for a day, and her face was always so blank it's impossible to know what she was thinking or feeling good. Then to Naruto's surprise, Ophis then looked at the piece of paper she was holding in her hands, raising it high enough for Naruto to see neat handwriting on it. He couldn't read much because Ophis lowered it down, nodded as if she was sure of something, and then looked back up at him, but the first line that he was able to read on that note was, "First, do an impression. Scare him with your power, Ophis-chan, and then ask him if he is scared. Naruto Uzumaki, I have come to tell you that you are making so much noise from your room as you have steamy hardcore sex with Rias Gremory that you two are disturbing my roommate's beauty sleep." The dragon god began, speaking up like she was reading something, causing Naruto to have an urge to facepalm because she was using the nickname Kuroka had gotten for him, similar to how Kaneko always called him Saito-senpai. It wasn't that difficult for Naruto to piece things together. Ophis came here in the middle of the night, staying in the same room as Kuroka that he then realized was right next to his, carrying a piece of paper with something that were probably speeches and instructions the sensual Nekisha had prepared in advance for her to tell him. The walls of this hotel is not soundproofed, or even if they are, I do not think they could stop the sounds of your violent fucking. She then suddenly pointed a finger at his face, making Naruto lean his head cautiously because he knew that if she wanted to she could just one-shot him there with a bust of her power. So if you two don't stop, or at least try to keep it to yourself, then I will bring this whole hotel down upon you. More than 18,000 earthquakes have shaken the area in just over a week, so no one will ask a question if there is one strong enough to bring the whole building down. She finished, nodding to herself as if she was acknowledging that she had just accomplished her assigned task beautifully. Naruto then looked out of the room and caught sight of Kuroka and Luffy peeking at him from behind the slightly open door of their room. Realizing that he was looking directly at them, the two shot back into their room and slammed the door shut. Can you please tell them that I have received their message and that I am sorry for disturbing them? Naruto told Ophis as he leaned back, making the dragon god girl nod her head. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Naruto. Good night. Saying that, Ophis raised a hand and waved at him before she turned on her cat clippers, and then went back to her room without saying any other words. Naruto waited till the door had closed to return to his room, and despite the nervousness he had felt previously, he couldn't stop himself from smiling a little. That was very scary of Office, but really cute at the same time. Great, I will see you and everyone tomorrow then. As Naruto came back into the room, it appeared that she had also finished with her talk on the phone. Good night, Sona. Is that Sona Kaishu? Naruto asked as Rias closed her phone, lying down next to her. It is. She wants to have a group gathering with us tomorrow at a restaurant not too far from here. Rias nodded his head and answered him. While putting her phone away, she also invited Serorg and Sikvera, the two of them, and their servants. It was thanks to Kuroka and Luffy, who were both extremely prominent in teleportation magic, that they were able to quickly move so many people outside the city to the disaster shelters near Laugardalshul Sports Center, so they could set up a large and tremendously powerful barrier around the area to better protect them from the fights outside. The MSI tournament had also been cancelled, and the pro gamers and spectators had all been moved to a safer location. It was far from the best, but it was all that they could manage in such a short time. Everything is going to be okay, Naruto-kun. Seeing the look on his face, Momo reassured him with a soft smile, which Naruto couldn't help but return after seeing it. Thanks Momo-chan, about earlier, I mean. He then added before Momo could say or ask anything, causing her to look at him in curiosity. You were the first to tell Sona Kaicho to not hand me an office over to Chow Chow and his goons. I know that Kaicho wouldn't have come to that option regardless, but it still felt nice to have friends standing up for you, so thank you Momo-chan. Momo looked at him for a second before she shook her head and told him with another smile, you don't have to, Naruto-kun. She said before looking back at the evacuating people. I only did what felt natural for me at the time, that's all. I see. Naruto smiled before he noticed Ravel flying toward him from the sports center. So, Momo-chan. Are you free this weekend? You want to ask me out on a date or what? Aren't you dating Ria-senpai, Naruto-kun? Despite not having any negativity about them, Momo had asked those questions faster than both of them had expected her to as she looked over to him with a playful smile on her face and her arms crossing under her chest. Yeah, but Naruto was a bit surprised, but not because Momo knew about him and Rias. In an environment like Kuo Academy, of course everyone would know if they were dating or not, even though the two of them had tried to be very careful about it. Before he could continue on, Momo moved her head closer to him. Even though she was standing only to his chest, Naruto was forced to lean back a little as he looked at her with a somewhat nervous smile. Are you trying to build a harem, Naruto-kun? Who gave you that idea? Just an assumption. Plus, it's not that hard to get the idea when there's a pervert that's not shy to tell everyone his dream. Momo answered him casually, making Naruto chuckle in amusement. You don't have to answer that question. I just want to know if you are really asking me out on a date or not. Yeah, kinda, but if you don't want to, Sure, I accept. Momo interrupted him before he could finish, standing straight up and smiling beautifully at Naruto. Live through this battle, and we will talk more about it, she asked, having noticed Ravel making her way toward them, and knowing that Naruto was needed in the war room. Yeah. Naruto grinned and nodded his head at her. So, is Ria-senpai okay with it? I assume that she is, and you two have talked about it? She is. Naruto said as Ravel landed on the ground next to him, and made her wings of fire disappear. The evacuating people of Reykjavik were shocked, but there's no point in hiding their powers at the moment. Later, they could use memory-altering spells to make sure that they would just remember the battle as a terrible earthquake or something like that. Look, I will see you later, Momo-chan. Please be careful. You too, Naruto-kun. Momo nodded her head and said finally to him as Naruto left with Ravel, heading back to Laugardalshul Sports Center. Since he was in a hurry, the blonde did not see the gleeful expression on Momo's face as she turned back to lead the citizens of Reykjavik with the policeman, cheeks dusting pink. It did not take long for Naruto to arrive at the temporary war room, where Azazel and the rookies 4 were standing around a table in the middle of the room with a map of Reykjavik spread out in front of them. Valle was standing with his back leaning against the wall behind Azazel, arms crossing on his chest with a seemingly uninterested look on his face. On the chair next to him was none other than Ophis, who did not seem to be bothered by the tense atmosphere in the slightest like Valle. "Hey everyone." Naruto greeted and informed the group of his arrival, making them look at him as he came to stand next to Rias with Rave. "How's the plan coming along?" he asked, looking at the map and saw several different colored circles Sona and Rias had drawn on it after collecting intel from their familiars and those who they had sent to the outskirts of Reykjavik as scouts. He had no difficulty telling which ones were the areas that they needed to defend, and which were the places that they needed to attack to take down the enemy's city-scaled barriers around the city, which were similar to the one they had used during the peace treaty attack, currently preventing the Alliance's reinforcements from reaching them. Azazel appeared to have contacted the other leaders of the three factions and their allies, informing them about everything that had happened. Even Asgard was said to have sent their forces to aid them, but until they could disable the barriers, they were on their own. "We're done here," Rias answered him, looking at the map in front of her with a thoughtful expression. "All that is left for us to do is spread the world to the others. However, we still don't know how the enemies are going to attack us." Sikvera spoke in a calm tone. After a small talk with Rias and Azazel, the Agar's heiress had decided to let Kuroka off the hook for the time being, especially after she had aided them with the evacuation of the city. However, it was obvious that she would bring the topic back up later. "An attack of this scale, I highly doubt that they are going to come at us with just magicians." "Do we know who they are?" Naruto couldn't help but ask. "From the intel I have been able to gather, they call themselves the Hero faction." Azazel spoke up and put a small device on the table, which then projected the images of Cao Cao, Hercules and Jean. "They are a group consisting solely of humans whose hatred of gods, devils, angels and other supernatural beings borders on the irrational. It appears that like the three you have met, all members of the Hero faction were descendants, or related to the heroes of the past in some ways, hence the name they have chosen for themselves, the Hero factions." "How ironic," Naruto scoffed. They think all supernatural beings in this world are evil, and take it upon themselves to exterminate us, the monsters in their eyes." Azazel chuckled at that and continued. "All members of their group seem to be sacred gear, holy swords, demon swords, and or Longinus wielders. In fact, the spear Cao Cao holding in his hand here is none other than true Longinus, the first and most powerful Longinus that has given all sacred gears with the capabilities to destroy the world its name, the same spear which Saint Longinus used to stab Jesus Christ. He is without a doubt the most dangerous enemy we need to watch out for." Sona nodded her head as Naruto and Ravel widened their in surprise. "The other two are Jean, the inheritor of the spirit of the Maiden of Orleans, Joan of Arc, and Heracles, inheritor of the spirit of the Greek mythological hero, who he shared his name with. Heracles possesses a sacred gear that allows him to generate explosions on anything he comes into contact with, while Jean seems to possess a sacred gear similar to Kiba Yudokoan's blade blacksmith, but with the ability to create holy swords instead." From the information Valle had given us, the leading group of the Hero faction also consisted of George, a top-class magician with the Longinus dimension lost, and Siegfried. He owns the sacred gear Twice Critical and a collection of demon swords including the legendary demonic emperor sword, Gram. Sona finished and Naruto turned his head over to Valle to give him a nod of acknowledgement, which he returned. "Arthur Pendragon has volunteered to fight Siegfried if we encounter him," Rias explained. "However, he and the leading group of the Hero faction are not our primary targets." Sona continued as Rias nodded her head in confirmation. "Our objective is to take down the barriers around the city as soon as possible, and that's where you came in, Uzumaki-Koen. You will lead the attacks against these barriers. Magic of this scale cannot be maintained by a single magician at a single location. The enemies will need several groups to do it." She then pointed her hand at the red circles on the map. "These are the locations with the largest magical concentrations, and we have reasons to believe that they are where our targets are. There are 4 of them in total, and we need to take them all down in order for the Alliance's reinforcement to join us." Naruto nodded his head in understanding, but before he could say anything, Sona had continued. "Now, While you are the enemy's primary target along with Ophis, having you fighting at the front line is strategically not the best move we can make. However, it is undeniable that you are among the strongest fighters of us. Keeping you here and holding you back will only make it much more difficult for us to push through the enemy's defense, not to mention that your champions are the keys for us to not get completely overwhelmed by whatever they are going to attack us with. How many of them can you summon at the moment? Sikvera asked. 20 champions, but it will vary depending on their true strength. The only exception being Aurelian Soul. I still cannot summon him without emptying everything I have. Naruto answered, sneaking a glance over to Ophis, whose head perked up upon hearing the name of the celestial dragon. Understandable. Sona nodded her head, making Naruto cock an eyebrow. The more allies we have with us, the better. Even a single champion can make a difference. Issei can provide you with the power you need. He has developed the ability to transfer his multiplied power into a chosen ally, but it's best that you don't push yourself too far. We will need you on the front line. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Now listen very carefully, Naruto-kun. Sona began as she put her hands on the table and drew an arrow at a specific circle on the map, making Naruto lean forward and look at it. This is what you need to do. Break. You ready, Rias? Naruto asked, looking over at his girlfriend who was double-checking the communication magic circle on her wrist. She had also just finished giving her order to the other members of her peerage. Yes, I am ready. The crimson-haired heiress smiled and nodded her head at her boyfriend, who then glanced to the side and noticed Kaneko standing by herself near a pillar inside the sports center. Like the others, she had gotten ready for the battle and finished gearing up, wearing a pair of black fighter's gloves with pink cat paws prints on the upper palms. From what Kuroka had said earlier, Kaneko never really needed those gloves to fight. Wait here, Rias. Naruto told his girlfriend and then walked toward the white-haired girl, leaving Rias behind to look at him in curiosity. Kaneko heard his footsteps and looked at him. Hey there, Kaneko-chan, can I talk to you for a second? Yes, senpai. I know that it's not my place to ask anything from you, but... He began, lowering himself down so that he could look at her eyes. I know that you are scared of losing control of yourself like what happened to your sister, but don't you think that we will need to give it our all for this battle? He asked, making Kaneko look at him, her eyes glaring dangerously for a second before she lowered her head down, a look of sadness on her face. I know it will be difficult for you, but if we hold ourselves back in this battle, then the person fighting with us can be hurt. What if I am the one who ends up hurting them, senpai? Kaneko asked, her tone low. What if I hurt you in Bucho? You won't, Kaneko-chan. Naruto assured her firmly, making Kaneko look at him. There's no way that you will lose control over yourself just because you finally accept who you really are, a strong and kind girl. Senpai. Even if you do, I will stop you, Kaneko-chan, before you can hurt me or anyone else, so you don't have to worry about anything. He said, raising a hand and putting it on Kaneko's head, gently stroking her hair. From taking care of Yuki, he knew how much Cat loved to be petted, and if Nekisha really had characteristics of a cat, then there should be no problem for him as well, and I know your sister will too. I don't know why, but I know for a fact that Kuroka will not let the same thing happen to you, Kaneko-chan. He added, making Kaneko glance at her sister, who was talking to Valley, and the others in her usual self. With the exception of Valley and Arthur, the rest would stay behind to protect Ophis, and the humans currently staying inside the sports center's arena. Sona and Sikvera both did not trust them enough to let them all go out and fight on the front line. So trust yourself, okay? Watch out for the others for me. He told her finally and stood up to walk back to Rias, who had grouped up with the other high-class devils, and Azazel, who would also participate in the battle with them. Naruto-senpai. Before he could come to them, Kaneko called after him loudly, making Naruto turn his head around and look at her. Thank you. She said, giving him a warm smile that he had never seen before on the white-haired girl's normally emotionless face. You are welcomed. The blonde grinned and gave her a thumb up before he continued making his way toward Rias and the others, not noticing a certain black-haired young woman who had also had a soft smile on her face as she looked at him from behind.
Are your champions in position, Uzumaki-kun? Sona Citri asked when Naruto grouped up with them.
Yes, Sona Kaicho, they are all in positions.
Naruto told her, earning nods of approval from Azazel and the high-class devils.
Right, then it's time. We have 5 minutes and Chow Chow is already on the move. Seek Vera informed them, nodding her head to her servant, who was among those scouting the enemy's current positions just outside the city. But before the group could start walking away, Naruto decided to stop them, deciding to speak up what had been on his mind since the start of the preparation. Can I say something? He spoke up, making them turn their heads to look at him. I just want everyone to know how grateful I am to have you guys heading into this battle with me. I know that this will be a very difficult battle for all of us.
Naruto continued, looking at the people standing in front of him as Azazel gave him a small smile.
The enemies will know we are coming, and I don't expect them to think that you guys would just hand me an office over to them, so they will prepare for us. Odds are we will be heading right into their fires, but we all have prepared for the worst.
But the people of Reykjavik, they didn't sign up for any of this.
Most of them didn't even know about us this morning, so even if our priority is to take down the barriers around the city, we will do it not because we want to get out. We do it because it's the best we can do to protect the innocent people of Reykjavik. Naruto paused for a second before continuing, his tone becoming serious as he said, so keep the fight between us and them, save as many people as you can. There are still others out there who have yet to make it to the shelters. Those guys from the so-called hero faction think that we're the evils of this world, and that we are nothing but monsters. This fight just isn't about beating them. It's about whether we can prove them wrong or not.
Naruto finished, earning nods of approval and smiles from the high-class devils around him, even from someone he had never seen smiling before like Seek Vera.
All right everyone, you heard the man. Let's go.
Azazel announced, good luck and try to not get yourself killed, got it?
Yes. And with that, the group parted away with Serorg and his queen setting off to take the east by themselves, Sona heading to the north and Seek Vera making her way to the south with her servants, while Rias and Azazel accompanied Naruto to the place that the enemy's representatives were waiting for them. With a number of Naruto's champions, the rest of the Occult Research Club would fight to protect the West and help out wherever that needed them. It's a good speech, kid. Azazel then tapped his shoulder and said to him, as he leaned a bit toward the blonde with a smirk on his face as Rias stifled a soft giggle, just don't let them know that you copied the speech of Captain America from Age of Ultron before the Battle of Sokovia. Let's hope that we do better than them in the movie too.
Naruto said to the governor, who nodded his head in approval. Shortly after that, Naruto, being accompanied by Rias and Azazel, walked to the square in front of Helgrimskirkja Church, where Chow Chow and his 2 companions were.
Obviously, they had chosen the holiest ground in all of Reykjavik to meet with the devils, giving them a feeling of unease as well as gaining a slight edge if their terms were not met. However, it was thanks to Irina's blessing of an angel that she had given them during the touring around the city on the first day. Naruto and Rias were able to ignore the holy aura radiating from the church. Serorg, meanwhile, did not look like he was being bothered by it in the slightest.
You are 5 minutes late, you know?
Chow Chow spoke to them as the 3 stopped a few meters in front of him, standing up from where he was sitting and flinging his spear around to put it on his shoulder. Sorry, we got lost on the path of life and had to find our way here.
Naruto stated absently, making Heracles glared at him.
Nice spear, kid.
Mind if I borrow it for a couple of experiments? Azazel chimed in, smiling amusedly at the true Longinus.
I do not see the Ouroboros dragon. Ignoring both remarks, Chow Chow said after taking a quick glance around, it appears that you have chosen death for yourself and your friends, Naruto Uzumaki. You know what, Chow Chow? How about we quit talking and get straight to the point?
Naruto asked, his demonic power flaring around him. Instantly, Chow Chow made his move, thrusting his spear forward, aiming at Naruto's heart.
Despite the speed of its extension, Azazel had no trouble keeping up with it and shot his hand forward to grab the spear before it could even reach his student. Cao Cao merely smirked in response, expecting no less from the governor of the fallen angels, and retracted his spear back with the same speed, stabbing it down to the ground to create a holy barrier that negated Rias' attack, a concentrated wave of power of destruction. Once that the crimson and black demonic power had disappeared, Heracles and Jean shot forward, but the inheritor of the legendary Greek hero were immediately stopped by a smirking Azazel as Naruto clashed swords with the Holy Sword's creator, pushing her back with a series of quick, dashing left and right to dodge her attacks in an alpha strike formation before finishing with a decisive Wuju sword strike, shattering her holy sword and leaving a deep gash on her armor before Rias sent a massive orb of demonic power at her, forcing Jean to create a demonic erasing sword to shield herself from it. On the other side, Azazel used his wings to shield himself from the explosions generated from Heracles' punches, and then he emerged a second later from them with only his clothes being slightly damaged to throw a fist into Heracles' gut, causing him to cough blood from his mouth before sending both him and Jean away with a simple flap of his wings, sending Heracles crashing into a building, but his companion was able to turn herself around in midair and stab the holy sword in her hand down into the ground to stop herself, gritting her teeth at the fallen angel. Cao Cao, who did not make a single move the entire time, suddenly raised his spear up and pointed it at the sky. It was then that Naruto began to feel a trembling in the ground. At first, he had mistaken it for a small earthquake, until Naruto heard howling and roaring noises, and then looked to the streets behind Cao Cao to see an army of dark, shadowy humanoid monsters rushing toward them, leaving a path of destruction on their paths as they relentlessly tore through the vehicles and buildings on their ways. Do not think that you are the only one who has come prepared, Naruto shouted, causing the smirk on Cao Cao's face to disappear as the ground underneath him cracked and shook violently. Cao Cao wasted no time to leap into the air, just in time to dodge the shard of the monolith, Malphite, as he burst through the ground with his gigantic, rocky body, unleashing a mighty roar that shook the entire area, before climbing out and facing the incoming waves of monsters. With another roar, the living rock monument hurled a boulder at the army of monsters, effectively eliminating several of them, but soon more arrived, several of which were larger and nastier than the ones before it, some even matching Malphite in size. I see, so you have the wielder of the Annihilation Maker in your group, Azazel said in realization as he shot into the air to dodge the holy swords that were summoned on the ground by Jean to pierce him from below. Once he was in the air, the 12-winged fallen angel spread his arms and summoned numerous weapons of light, which he then launched at the monsters that had climbed over the boulder Malphite had hurled at them, killing many in the process. He then disappeared from sight as Jean tried to sneak attack him from behind, and then reappeared behind her to slam his elbow into her back, smashing her into the ground. Above him, Malphite was fighting the larger monsters, destroying them and sending them back with his devastating punches as Naruto and Rias fought the foot soldier monsters near his feet, trying to clear as many of them as possible. However, it did not take long for them to see that taking down a single monster seemed to be a challenge to both of them. Naruto, Rias. These monsters are anti-monsters, created by Annihilation Maker, Azazel informed the two through the communication magic circles appearing near their ears while fighting Cao Cao, who surprisingly could hold his own very well against him. As far as I can tell, they are specifically designed to fight you devils, so they are highly resilient to your demonic powers and magic. Got it, sensei. Understanding what needed to be done, Naruto then switched his demon blade with another sword, Vanquish, and used it to cut down the monsters around him and Rias in quick succession, finishing them off with powerful shots to head from the silver revolver in his left hand. Rias then wasted no time informing her peerage and the others, telling them exactly what they needed to do to take down the monsters that had been created to deal with them specifically. Heracles, who emerged from the building Serord had sent him into with numerous missile-like objects on his body, fired a barrage of missiles at Naruto and Rias, generating a massive explosion that annihilated the entire area around them. The descendant of the Greek mythology hero smirked victoriously at the result of his balance breaker's attack, but his expression soon turned upside down when a strong gust of wind dispersed the cloud of smoke and revealed a beautiful woman with reddish-orange hair wearing a full set of golden armor that were glowing like the sun standing in front of Naruto and Rias, holding in one hand a long sword and a shield that were radiating a protecting aura that she had used to cover the couple from the explosions. Celestial fire. The radiant dawn and the aspect of the sun, Leona roared as she thrust her sword toward the sky, making the clouds part and summoning a beam of solar flare at Heracles, who were blasted away by the explosion of concentrated sunlight even though he had tried to dodge it. Just when Naruto was about to follow up with an attack of his own, a new enemy arrived at the scene, a young man with silver-white hair and red eyes. Like other members of the hero faction, he wore a school uniform, combined with a priest's coat on top of it similar to the late mentally unstable stray priest, Fried Selzen. But the most noticeable feature about him was that he also wore a belt that held his 5 demon swords and a light sword, which were around his waist and legs, forming a sword skirt. There you are. Naruto smirked as Siegfried rushed into battle. Azazel-sensei, we leave this area to you. You got it. The governor answered back with a smirk, throwing a light spear at Cao Cao only for him to send it away to another direction with one of the 7 orbs he had created. Interesting ability. So I assume that each orb can do a different thing. With that said, he summoned a pair of light swords and rushed toward the leader of the hero faction, who joined force with Jean to take him on. Malphite. Leona. Naruto shouted and the living monolith slammed his fist into the ground, sending an incoming horde of anti-monsters away with a shockwave as Leona rushed in and fought Siegfried, preventing him from reaching her summoner. The combined effort of the two gave Naruto just enough time to activate his balance breaker, but not to empower any of his champions on the field, but to summon a unique Ducati Panigale V4 motorcycle that was silver in color and had glowing blue rims. Let's go, Rias. With that said to his girlfriend, Naruto jumped onto the vehicle that belonged to K/Da All-Out Akali, revving up the engine and driving it away at top speed once Rias had climbed on and wrapped her arms around his waist. Siegfried growled in annoyance and pushed Leona back with a devastating strike of his demonic emperor sword Gram to chase after the two. The radiant dawn was quick to recover and went after him, but she soon found herself completely surrounded by the anti-monsters, and had no choice but to fight them first. Before Siegfried could catch up to their primary target, he suddenly felt something coming at him from his left and slashed his sword toward that direction, cutting what then appeared to be a paint spray bottle, which then unleashed a large cloud of black and silvery white smoke all around him, blocking his vision. Instantly, the white-haired swordsman used his sword Bamung to create powerful whirlwinds, making the smoke disperse and reveal his attacker, a beautiful woman with blonde hair and dyed blue locks. She was dressed in a silver half-jacket over a blue sporty top and form-fitting black pants with white stripes and matching colored belt, looking more of a pop star idol than a combatant despite wielding a multicolored, crystal-like kama that she was spinning in one hand and a similar design kunai that she held at her hip in the other. As dangerous as this woman could be, she was far from his main concern. Arthur. Siegfried acknowledged the swordsman standing next to the woman, who had a calm expression on his face as he unsheathed another one of his holy swords. I take that one of the reasons for you to join those filthy devils is a chance to fight me directly. You are very correct, Siegfried. Arthur replied before he turned his head around to look at Akali, giving her a nod that she returned before the rogue assassin, donning her K/Da all-out skin, turned around and went after her summoner and Rias, wasting no time at all to catch up to them by leaping from building to building and moving at the speed of a highly trained superpower assassin. So, shall we? And with that, the two swordsmen charged at each other. Break. They took the bait. Sona. We're heading to your location. Rias shouted over the strong wind as Naruto drove them through the streets of Reykjavik, which was being overran by anti-monsters. Several tried to attack them, but they were immediately dealt with by Akali, who dashed and leapt between enemies to execute them with perfect execution strikes, removing them from the couple's path. Over a dozen members of the hero faction were also trying to chase them, but one by one they were taken down faster than their eyes could follow by both Ari and Evelyn, who were working together to quickly assassinate their targets before moving on to the next, having no difficulty catching up to Naruto and Rias with Spirit Rush for Ari and Shrouded Demon Shade for Evelyn. Donning their K/DA all-out skins just like Akali, giving them the stylish and flashy appearances of the popstar group Riot had created. Unlike other skin line, this one actually did nothing special, but gave each of their abilities a fancier look when Naruto used his balance breaker on them, as he did so only to get Akali's bike. Their plan of attack was very simple. Since Naruto was their primary target, with Ophis being off-limited as she was the Ouroboros dragon god, and not to mention that she was being protected by Valley and his team, it was without a doubt that the enemies would try to take him down as quickly as possible and send their members after him. With the intel Valley had given them, they knew who were the most dangerous individuals of the hero faction, and it was Naruto's job to draw out as many of them as possible. Cao Cao, their leader, along with Jean and Heracles, would definitely try to kill Naruto as quickly as possible no matter the answer to their threat that he would give them. Holding in his hand true Longinus, Cao Cao would no doubt have the best chance to instantly kill Naruto, but with Azazel being there with him, the chance of him getting killed on the spot was extremely low. The three would then fight until they could force at least one more core member of the hero faction to appear, which in the case had been Siegfried. Once that phase 1 had been completed, Naruto and Rias would then leave Azazel with two of his champions and Arthur to fight Cao Cao and the others, and move to the location of the nearest peerage, who would be defending their assigned areas to join force with them in an attack against the first group of magicians holding up one of the barriers around Reykjavik. Not counting that anti-monsters, which Sona and Rias had anticipated to be something of great number before fully knowing what they were when they appeared, Naruto and his girlfriend would no doubt be chased by the other members of the hero factions, but Naruto could have his champions dealt with them, specifically enlisting those who had great mobility so that they could follow him and take down the enemies as quickly as possible. Moreover, by making them chase him around the city, the enemies would be forced to be constantly on the move, giving the peerages a better chance of defending their positions and leaving openings for them to push forward. "Hold up, is that a dragon?" Naruto asked when he heard an earth-shaking roar, and looked up to see a dragon-like anti-monsters flying above them. However, it soon appeared to be not the only one, as more and more anti-monsters like it started appearing on the sky, several of which heading straight at them. Those must be anti-monsters that are created to fight Issei and Saji, dragon-type sacred gear possessors. Rias told him as Naruto moved the bike to the side to dodge a fireball. "It means we are close to Sona and her peerage." "Naruto, we can't reach those monsters." Ari, who had blonde hair that became pink toward the tip and crystal-like tails, told him as she ran alongside Naruto and Rias, her whole body being covered in a colorful aura, that was the K/DA all-out form's own version of her Spirit Rush ability. "Don't worry, she can." Naruto answered the nine-tailed Gumiho, before he did a sharp turn with his bike to dodge another fireball that were fired at him, just in time to see a woman with two wing-like objects hovering above her shoulder and long dark blue hair with green highlight tied back in a high ponytail dashing past him at high speed while being covering in a radiating barrier that had the same color as Ari's, leaving a trail of matching colored energy and afterimages behind her. She then ran up the vertical surface of a tall building and launched herself into the air, where she then began to shoot down the dragon-like anti-monsters in the air with plasma beams that were fired from the sword-like objects in her hands, which had the same design as her wings and Akali's weapons. Well, if it isn't the daughter of the Void herself." Evelyn spoke with a smirk as Kayase opened her wings and fired a swarm of plasma missiles, her Icathian rain ability, at the anti-monsters in the air, destroying their armors before finishing them off with a series of void blasts. "Finally having real clothes to wear now, I see." The ancient demoness continued to tease Kayase, as the daughter of the void landed on the ground next to her on one knee, as the dragon anti-monsters she had killed fell down from the sky and dispersed. Giving Evelyn nothing but a roll of her eyes, Kayase then covered herself in plasma energy and swiftly dashed after her summoner, making Evelyn smirk before she followed her in her demon spade, the two champions wasting no time at all to group with Akali and Ari, forming a defensive formation around their summoner as he reached his first target. Chapter 28. Tsubaki Shinra was the queen of Sona Citri and the vice president of the student council, thus making her the second in command of the Citri group currently fighting to protect the north of Reykjavik City, which had become a war zone with the revelation of the army of anti-monsters. Well, fighting would be a generous description. Barely surviving would be a more accurate term to describe what they were doing at the moment, as the group tried to defend their assigned area against a seemingly endless horde of anti-monsters, all of which had been specifically designed to target their weaknesses while being accompanied by magicians. It also did not help that they were one member short, as Momo had to stay behind with the other bishops to hold the barrier around Laugardalshul Sports Center area. Issei, finish them! Sona shouted as a blue magic circle with the crest of the Citri appeared in front of her hand and summoned a gigantic water serpent that dashed forward and swiped across the area in front of them and effectively removed the anti-monsters that tried to sneak up on her servants. Yes, Kaicho! Dragon shot! The Seker Uti shouted back, gathering his energy into an orb in front of him before grabbing it with his boosted gear to launch a beam of concentrated demonic power and multiplied energy at the group of monsters, destroying an entire area in front of him and killing several monsters in the process. However, it did not take it long for the remaining monsters to be joined by others and pick themselves up to continue marching on toward them. Their resistance to demonic powers proved to be extremely difficult for them to overcome even though they had two dragon-type sacred gear processors among them, as they were both being occupied by dragon monsters that were targeting them. How is there so many of them? Saji gritted his teeth and asked as Issei retreated back and started boosting up his energy again. Can a single person create this many monsters by himself? Our enemy is the possessor of Annihilation Maker, a top-tier Longinus sacred gear with the power to destroy the world. Its potential is only limited by its user's imagination. Tsubaki answered as she used her magic and called down a powerful bolt of lightning from the sky to empower another water serpent that was summoned by Sona, increasing its offensive power as it wrapped around a large monster it is said to have destroyed countries in a matter of hours in the past. Seriously? Focus, Issei. We can't afford to lose our concentration here. Sona firmly reminded him, making the Seker Uti nod his head in understanding before he discharged another dragon shot. In all the years that she had trained with and used her sacred gear, Tsubaki had never reached the condition for its balance breaker so fast. Mirror Alice allowed her to create a mirror that if destroyed reflects double the damage on the attacker, giving her a better chance than the other members of Sona's peerage, as she fought her enemies with the combined strength of her magic and the same powers that they used to attack her with. Her balance breaker, meanwhile, led her to summon demons that had different abilities from her mirrors, but the conditions to activate it was to use Mirror Alice to perform a certain number of counterattacks. In a fight that she was slowly being overwhelmed by a large group of enemies, Tsubaki met the conditions to activate her Nostalgia Mad Tea Party, allowing the vice president of Kuoa's student council to call to her aid numerous demons that took on the form of large animals with different abilities, but even with them she was still having a difficult time pushing forward. Tsubaki-senpai! Watch out! Tsubaki heard Saji's shout and looked up to see a purple beam of energy coming at her from above, being fired by one of the dragons flying on the sky. The Queen of Sona Citri wasted no time conjuring her mirror to reflect it, but it was immediately shattered upon impact, leaving it to continue to advance toward her. But before it could swallow Tsubaki and fatally wound her, Naruto had jumped down in front of the Queen of Sona Citri with the glowing shield of daybreak in his hand and used it to shield her from the attack, causing the beam to disperse into multiple smaller ones around them, destroying the ground around Naruto and Tsubaki, but the blonde stood his ground, a crater appearing under his left foot. Naruto then waited till it had vanished to lower his shield down and brought out the Whisper in its full rifle form. It took only half a second for the League Summoner to take aim and fire at the dragon anti-monster, blasting off its ribcage with an empowered fourth shot. Over a dozen more arrived to attack him, but Kayase dashed across the sky in her killer instinct and took them all down. Years of fighting dangerous and gruesome Voidborn in the void allowed her to make quick work of the anti-monsters. You okay, senpai? Naruto asked as he turned his head around and looked at Tsubaki, who could only nod her head in response before looking around the battlefield.
Rias Gremory had joined the fight and were currently fighting alongside her master, the two heiresses sending waves of their combined demonic powers at the anti-monsters around them, pushing them back and allowing Naruto's champions to quickly go in and finish them off before they moved on to the next ones. Wait, are they K/DA? Tsubaki asked in surprise, noticing the unique appearances of Naruto's champions. Want a signature? Evelyn asked, making the bespectacled woman flinch as she appeared behind her. Tsubaki spun around and looked warily at the silver-haired demon, who licked the blood on her nails as she dragged a dead member of the hero faction in her hand, his body horribly disfigured. Seriously, Evelyn, do you really need to drag a body with you? Naruto narrowed his eyes at Evelyn, who stifled a soft, lustful giggle. Can a girl enjoy a little bit of fun? Those monsters don't spill blood when I shove my lasher into their chests, you know. Whatever, just go help the others. Naruto told her, and Evelyn flashed him a flirtatious wink before darkness wrapped around her, and she seemingly vanished, but Naruto could feel a hard squeeze at his crotch before several anti-monsters and magicians began to drop dead on the ground. Sorry about that, senpai. It's okay, Uzumaki-kun. Tsubaki shook her head and answered before holding up her hands, making several magic circles appear. Come on, we are close to the first group of barrier magicians. Let's take them down. Roger that, senpai. Grinning and nodding his head at Tsubaki, Naruto summoned Starfire Spellblade in his hand and spun around, slashing the blade horizontally to send out a wave of divine flame with holy attributes at a group of anti-monsters, serving their torso from their lower bodies before burning them down and removing them permanently from the fire. Not stopping, Naruto started pushing forward, removing the rifle sniper barrel of the Whisper to wield it in pistol form alongside his holy sword, eliminating monster after monster, magician after magician as he, Rias and his champions aided Sona and her peerage, slowly but surely gaining the upper hand in their battle. Kaicho Rias senpai. Tomo Meguri, currently the only knight of Sona Citri, shouted as she pointed her hand at a group of magicians, who were currently standing around a large device with a large crystal on top. The place was also heavily guarded, with a large number of magicians and members of the hero factions. Based on the intel that they had been able to gather in Azazel's analyst before the battle start, the device was used to increase the area of effect of those magicians' barrier magic, allowing them to encase the entire Reykjavik within it. There were 3 other devices like that around the city, and each peerage had been tasked to take it down as quickly as possible, with Naruto acting as reinforcement that moved from one location to another. Let's do this, Sona. Rias said as she began to gather her demonic power, creating multiple softball-sized bullets that she fired at the group of magicians that came charging at them, blasting them off and even sending back those who used barrier magic to protect themselves from her attack. Those who survived the first wave of her assault were then instantly dealt with by Sona, who summoned a dragon made of water and sent it at them, finishing them off before washing away. Everyone, focus everything you have on that device and those magicians. The president of the student council ordered as she controlled her water dragon to fight a massive anti-monster that suddenly appeared before them, holding it back until the 2 male members of her peerage Saji and Issei joined the fight. Uzumaki. We can really use some help here. Issei shouted as he and Saji held back a massive snake-like monster together, using the latter's sacred gear absorption line and the immense physical strength of a roll to hold it back and at the same time weakening it by absorbing its power. Naruto wasted no time to charge at the monster and then allowed Issei to boost him up, launching himself into the air before bringing Spellblade Starfire down its skull, driving his blade right down its head and killing it with a wave of divine flame. The monster slowly dissolved until only nothing was left, allowing Naruto to jump down. But there were no time for celebration of praise, as a group of heroes charged at them. Almost as soon as his left foot touched the ground, Naruto jumped up and sent his knee in the fact of an enemy, knocking him toward Issei and allowing the pawn of Sona Citri to finish him off with a left hook. Using his sacred gear, Saji joined them, tying a magician up with his energy-absorbing line before swinging, and then throwing him away. Stay out of our way. Naruto growled, as he split Starfire Spellblade into 2 and dual-wielded them,
surging forward and wreaking havoc through the rank of the now sluggish-looking enemies, leading the charge with Issei, Saji and Tomo fighting side by side with him, while Rias, Sona, another bishop of Hiraya Kosaka and Tsubaki assisting them from behind, with the K/DA making quick work of those who tried to get close to the two groups, dashing across the battlefield in a light show of colorful but deadly abilities. Hey Rias! As Rias killed another magician before he could even reach her boyfriend, she suddenly heard Azazel's voice coming from the communication magic circle on her wrist just a head up. Jean snuck away and probably headed your way. Just as he finished informing them that, a large dragon that seemingly had a body made of holy swords landed in front of Naruto and the charging group, with the one standing on its head being the inheritor of the Maiden of Orleans herself. Don't you think that you should tell us that sooner, Azazel-sensei? Rias asked with narrowed eyes. Sorry. Rias heard the governor of Grigori chuckling humorously before the call ended, allowing her to turn her attention back to Jean, who smirked down at Naruto and the others as she summoned numerous holy swords for the other members of her factions. The holy sword dragon unleashed a roar that shook the ground, but Naruto was not impressed by the display of power. Runeterra Arsenal Balance Breaker, Multiverse Transcendence. Just when Jean was about to order her balance breaker, Stake Victim Dragoon, to attack the devils beneath her, an announcement was heard just before Naruto's swords caught fire and began to change shape, taking on a more primal design with the upper half and tip of the blade glowing a dark orange light. His whole body began to glow with the same colored aura before he lowered himself down, and then shot forward, seemingly disappearing as he joined his swords into one single blade, the weapon of Dragonslayer Kale that she had used to slay so many dragons in her story, and used it to slice through the dragon's neck, severing its head from the rest of its body, and causing Jean to fall down. How? The inheritor of the Maiden of Orleans asked in shock, while looking at Naruto, as he deactivated the effect of multiverse transcendence to save his demon power, making Starfire Spellblade slowly revert back to its original form. Dragon-slaying weapon. Naruto answered simply and then charged at Jean, who gritted her teeth in frustration and raised her sword to block his strike, only for the blonde to disappear once again and reappear behind her in a Wuju stance, his blade soaking in the blood of the female hero as she was struck with 3 consecutive slashes of the Wuju sword art, Alpha Strike. A painful cry was all that the inheritor of the Maiden of Orleans could muster before she fell down into a pool of her own blood, as it sprayed out from the cuts Naruto had left on her body. The shield is down. Ari informed as her orb of deception floated back into her hand, giving her the essence of the enemies that she had killed in order to bring down the defense around the barrier device with the rest of the group. Stay back, Ari. Ria said and then gathered a large amount of demonic power into a single, compressed black orb with crimson aura, which she then threw at the barrier device. Upon reaching its target, the orb then expanded and exploded violently, swallowing and completely erasing everything that was within its 5-meter radius, leaving not even a trace of the barrier device when it disappeared. With the last magicians being taken care of by Evelyn and Akali, Naruto looked up and saw the first layer of barrier flickering unstably before it vanished. We did it! Tomo cheered and Naruto couldn't help but allow himself to breathe out in relief, but he and everyone knew that while they had won the battle, the war was still far from over. Wait, guys, look! Just when Naruto was about to resummon Akali's bike so he could drive to the next location, the blonde heard a shout from Issei and looked up to see another barrier collapsing, leaving the devil to look on in both surprise and awe. But who? Serord. Ria stated and then wasted no time to contact her cousin Serord. Was that you? Yeah. We are finished here, Rias. They all heard the Belair answered, and Naruto could not help but whistle in amazement. So that's the strongest youth devil. Even though he only had his queen at his side, it seemed the two of them had no problem dealing with the anti-monsters and magicians before destroying the barrier device on their own. Naruto had actually expected something like that from the crown's strongest youth devil, but now he finally understood why none of the heiresses believed he would be the last to need their backups. You and Naruto should help seek Vera next. Last I heard from her, she and her peerage had made it to the barrier device, but they were stopped by George, the sub-leader of the hero faction.
will. Thanks for the information, Serorg. Rias answered and deactivated the communication spell.
As expected from the strongest of us. Sona said finally before nodding her head to her childhood friend and rival Rias.
Leave this area to us.
We will come help you guys when this area is clear.
Understand that. Be careful, Sona, you guys.
Rias nodded her head to the Citriaris, and then left the area with Naruto on the summoned bike, with the K/DA wasting no time to go after them. As Naruto drove the two of them to seek Vera and her peerage's location, Rias removed one arm around his waist and activated the spell on her wrist to call her Queen, checking to make sure that her family were okay. Even though their goal was to take down the barriers around the city, if her peerage ran into trouble, she and Naruto would not hesitate to come help them, as they put the safety of their family and everyone else first and foremost.
Akino, can you hear me?
Rias asked as she moved her hand closer to Naruto, so he could hear it too.
Akino.
Yes, I can hear you, Rias. Sorry for that. Akino replied after a second, allowing Rias to let out a sigh she did not know she had been holding. She had felt a little worried there when Akino didn't answer her right away. You scared me and Naruto for a second there, you know.
Rias lightly scolded her best friend, and couldn't help but smile in return when she heard Akino's trademark giggle. How's everyone doing, Akino?
Not too shabby, Rias. Yuto-kun and Zenovia were slightly wounded in their fights against the swordsmen of the hero faction, but Asia-chan took care of them. Akino answered before she told them, making Rias nod head in understanding, immediately feeling worried upon hearing what had happened to her two knights. We have managed to make it to Brayholt district, but I decided to stop there because I was worried that if we continued anymore, we would leave gaps in our defense and allow the enemies to slip through.
I see. You made the right choice, Akino.
I would have done the same if I were you.
Rias told her, Queen, can you guys hold your current position until we arrive? Naruto and I are currently heading to seek Vera and her servant's location.
They are fighting the sub-leader of the hero faction, and can really use our help to bring down the third barrier.
Don't worry, Bucho. We will be fine here.
Akino paused for a second before continuing. By the way, tell Naruto-kun Kaneko-chan is fighting with her Nikomata powers.
Wait, really? Naruto asked, finding himself grinning as Rias gasped softly in surprise. Is she okay, senpai?
I dare say that she's better than okay, Naruto-kun. She's the reason we made it this far. Akino answered him, and Naruto could almost mentally see a smile on her face as she continued. I'm sorry if it means I was eavesdropping, but I heard what you said to Kaneko-chan. It's thanks to you that she overcame her fear of using senjutsu and finally accepted who she really is. Akino then paused for a second before continuing. It makes me wonder if I can be like her too.
What are you saying, Akino-senpai?
Of course, you can.
Naruto answered her.
There's no reason for you to hate your own blood, senpai.
Being a half-fallen angel will not change the fact that you are a wonderful and amazing person, senpai.
I knew you would say something like that, Naruto-kun. Akino giggled softly in response before she continued, speaking to her best friend. I'm sorry, Rias, but it seems I will compete with you more seriously from now on. Rias widened her eyes at that, and looked like she wanted to say something, but Akino beat her to it. Thank you, Naruto-kun.
Please watch me.
And with that, a massive magic circle with the crest of the Gremory household appeared on the sky before it started to rain upon the enemies below. Strike after strike of bluish white and yellow lightning, lightening up the darkening sky and destroying everything they struck with their holy powers.
Whoa! Naruto uttered while gasping in amazement.
It was his first time seeing it, but he only knew one girl who could cast lightning magic that powerful. Is that what I think it is?
Yes, Naruto. That's holy lightning, Akino's true power.
Rias nodded her head and answered her boyfriend with a small smile before she leaned down Naruto's back and wrapped her arms tightly around Naruto's waist, which did not pass unnoticed by the blonde, who found himself smiling at her nonetheless. It did not take it long to arrive at the Agar's location, where they were fighting against a large group of enemies, led by a magician standing behind purple mist-like barrier, which shielded him from every attack Sikvera and her servants were dishing out. He was a young man with black hair and spectacles. Like the other core members of his faction, he wore a Japanese school uniform, with his own choice of clothing being a mage-style robe with a feathered cape. Rias grabbed the handlebars. "Wait, what?" was the only thing that Rias could muster before she was forced to reach forward and grabbed onto the handlebars as Naruto got his foot onto the bike, and then shot into the air. Sikvera-san. The blonde shouted at the Yagar's heiress, as he summoned the batleth weapon of Renekton, the Butcher of the Sands. Their eyes met for a second before Naruto turned his attention back to George, who raised another shield to protect himself as Naruto raised the batleth over his head, and then brought it down with both hands, shattering the purple shield like glass upon impact and forcing the magician to jump back, a look of fear in his eyes as he realized what just happened. "Don't even think about it." Before George could cast a single spell, Sikvera used her demonic power and froze the time around him, allowing Naruto to quickly deliver a finishing strike with the batleth, fatally wounding George with a cut so deep across his torso the magician didn't even get the chance to let out a cry before falling onto his knee, blood spraying out of his wound before Naruto grabbed his hair and tossed him to the side. "Thanks for not killing him, Han," was the next thing George heard before his throat was stomped by the sole of a black heel, not hard enough to completely crush it, but enough for George to choke and cough up blood, at the same time pinning him down. "I'm Evelyn, nice to meet you. Let's have a good time." Agony's embrace greeted, slurring sultrily as she pushed her foot down until she heard a satisfying crack. One of her lashes shot out and slit the throat of a member of the hero faction that tried to save their sub-leader, as the other slowly slid into the wound Naruto had left on his torso. His screams were something that one could expect from the goriest horror movies, but it was nothing more than music to Evelyn's ear as she stood there with her hands on her hips, feeling all hot and bothered watching Naruto sliced and diced through the enemies, now in shamble at the sight of their defeated sub-leader. "Just, don't ask," Rias said, waving a hand at the Yagar's heiress and tried to turn her attention away from the gruesome scene when she wanted to ask about it. The two then joined force and began to pick off the remaining members of the hero factions and their magician companions, leaving the mindless anti-monsters to the K/DA to take care. As Naruto fought, he was amazed to realize that Sikvera's queen, Olivian, was an Eastern European dragon, who unleashed powerful fire breath on the anti-monsters below once Kaisa had helped him finish off the last of the dragon-type ones. Almost as soon as the path was clear for him, Olivian then unleashed a massive fireball that immediately destroyed the barrier device before them in a violent explosion that shook the whole area, forcing the remaining magicians to retreat, running away in fear as the third barrier collapsed, leaving only one remaining. "Is he dead?" Ari asked, looking at the emotionless body of George. He was currently lying face down in a pool of his own blood. When she tried to turn him around to check if he's still alive or not, Evelyn stopped her by wrapping her lasher around her ankle. "Don't. There are children here," the demoness said, giggling softly as she wiped her nails clean of the blood of her unfortunate enemies. "Best that we don't let them see my handiwork." "How kind of you," Naruto said with a tone full of sarcasm as he walked past the two female champions, making Evelyn flash him a wink before the blonde walked over to where Sikvera and Rias were standing. "How were you able to break his shield so quickly like that?" Sikvera asked. "Anti-shield weapon," Naruto answered, holding up Renekton's weapon. The blade was extremely heavy, weighing even more so than Leona's shield, but Naruto's now physically strong enough to wield it with just one hand. "This is my first time using this thing, so I didn't know if it would work or not, but considering how some of my other weapons work, I'm glad that I was right." "I see. Still, it's pretty reckless of you to charge headfirst into a fight like that. Try to be more careful next time," the Yagar's heiress told him, making Naruto chuckle while scratching the back of his head before he made the curved blade disappear. Sikvera then turned over to Rias and spoke to her. "You two should go now. The sooner we bring the last barrier down, the better. We will come help you guys out as soon as we have cleared out this area." "Understood."
Good luck, Rias, Naruto-san. And with that, the two climbed back onto Naruto's bike, and he drove them away with the K/DA following after them, making sure that they would have a smooth and quick run to the final group of magicians and their barrier device. The only sounds that could be heard was of the bike's engine buzzing through the eerie calm, which was rather strange considering how the streets and the sky of Reykjavik City was flooded with anti-monsters and members of the hero faction earlier. It was as if the possessor of Annihilation Maker had finally run out of power, which was perfectly understandable considering the amount of anti-monsters he had created hoping to overwhelm them at the start. Still, their progress to the final target was rather slow. Every so often they would come across citizens who couldn't evacuate in time and got stuck in their house, and the two would spend some time escorting them to the nearest shelters just to be safe. Once they had to extinguish a shop that had caught on fire, summoning Nami the mermaid tide caller to quickly put out of the fire with her water manipulating ability. A few minutes later, they even stopped to help some policemen fend off a group of anti-monsters from reaching a disaster shelter before transporting the injured to the nearest medical clinics. Having prioritized the safety of the citizens of Reykjavik, Naruto and Rias were more than happy to help them, as much as they wanted to keep moving and regroup with their friends as quickly as possible. There they are. Rias pointed her hand, and Naruto looked to see Irina and Ravel flying in the air raining light weapons and phoenix fire down the anti-monsters below, or at least, what were left of it. As the number of Annihilation Maker's creations decreased significantly, it wasn't that difficult for the Occult Research Club to continue pushing forward, with nothing but magicians and the lackeys of the hero factions left to stand in their way. Kiba! Naruto called loudly and drove over to him before parking his bike next to the knight, who had just finished another magician with his sword of betrayer. Save for a few burns and cuts, Kiba Yuto looked fine, but with the left sleeve of his blazer missing it was not that hard for Naruto and Rias to tell that he had been hurt there before Asia healed him. Bucho! Naruto-kun! Kiba greeted them with a relieved smile before looking over to the K/DA and giving them a nod of his head in acknowledgement before the four went past him to go into battle. Yuto, are you okay? I heard you got hurt. Rias worriedly said as she jumped down from the bike and went over to check on her knight. Don't worry, I'm okay, Bucho. I was careless, but Asia-chan healed me. The Prince of Kuo answered while scratching the back of his head, making Rias give him a long look. We can talk more about it later. Let's focus on our main objective for now. Chuckling, Naruto patted Kiba on the shoulder and reminded them as he jumped off his bike and walked to the side to look at the battle in front of him, noticing how Kaneko was fighting not too far from them with a pair of white cat ear and a tail poking out underneath her skirt. She seemed to have no problem striking down members of the hero faction she was fighting, despite not outright punching them and sending them flying like she usually did. Our target is over there. Kiba pointed his hand and then handed a binocular over to Naruto. Where he got it was a mystery, but Naruto did not bother to ask and take a look at the barrier device. Like the ones they had destroyed before, it was being sustained and protected by a group of magicians. However, unlike the previous device, it was also being protected by a man, or something similar, that was dressed in a black robe decorated with ornaments and wore a creepy looking that lied across his face, making him look like a clown, reminding somewhat of Shako, one of the evil champions he had been debating whether or not he should summon now that he had gotten stronger. In his hand was a dangerous-looking scythe with the handle being surrounded by deteriorating hands and tentacles that looked as if they were just freshly cut off of the flesh of a dead person, giving him the ill look of a grim reaper. What the hell is that? Naruto asked as he handed the binocular over to Rias, who gasped upon seeing the enemy. I don't know. He appeared a few minutes earlier and is the reason we are still stuck here. Kiba answered, and Naruto could understand why Kiba and the others did not try to risk it. That's a Grim Reaper, a servant of the ruler of the realm of the dead, Hades. Rias answered as she lowered the binocular down, but I have never seen one like his before. Just when Naruto was about to ask if they could possibly fight against an enemy like that, something crashed through the building behind them and forced the three to instinctively lower their heads. Looking around, they were surprised to see Azazel walking out of the collapsing wall with an amused smirk on his face, looking unscratched despite his wine-colored shirt being torn in some places. "Ah, you two are here already?" Azazel asked, looking at Naruto and Rias, who were both looking at him with wide eyes. "Sup? Sup?" Naruto asked in disbelief. "What happened to you?" "Who just, never mind that, where are Leona and Malphite?" "What about Chow Chow? Where is he?" The governor merely pointed his hand at the device location, and Naruto looked to see Chow Chow grouping up with the Grim Reaper, who acknowledged him with a nod of his head. "Geez, chill out, kid. Your champions are fine kids. The Sun Chick will be arriving soon. Her attitude is just the worst." Azazel then looked at Chow Chow and the Grim Reaper before continuing, "That guy is strong, stronger than I had expected. He's possibly one of the strongest humans that I have ever met, and those abilities of his sacred gear are really annoying. I was caught off guard when I tried to chase after him here. It seems we have to beat both him and that scary-looking Grim Reaper to get to that device," Naruto said as Azazel nodded his head in confirmation as he took out a lance-like golden dagger with a purple jewel at the end of the handle. "Do you know who he is?" "Yep. That's Pluto, an ultimate-class Grim Reaper and the strongest one out there," the governor answered as his wings appeared on his back. "I will hold him off, so you can take care of Chow Chow. Be careful and do not get yourself killed," the governor told them, his tone serious. "You too, Azazel-sensei," Naruto said as the dagger in his hand shone, and donned him in a set of golden dragon armor with purple jewels that covered his entire body, resembling that of Vala's vanishing dragon-scale male. Once that the dagger had become a two-pronged spear of light in his hand, Azazel shot into the air and slammed into Pluto, who reacted immediately to the fallen angel and took off on his own, engaging Azazel in a fierce air battle that sent shockwaves throughout the entire area, with the two of them seemingly evenly matched in both speed and strength. "Guys," Naruto alerted, turning Rias and Kiba's eyes down as Chow Chow teleported himself before them, a confident smirk on his face as he looked directly at Naruto. "What are you doing here, Chow Chow? Don't you think that you should have stayed behind and protected that device?" "Nah, I think I will pass. Never like guarding duty and those magicians anyway. Plus, it's also impossible for me to stop the device from getting destroyed now," Chow Chow said, the smirk never leaving his face. "With Azazel out of the way, there's no one stopping me from killing you now, Uzumaki." "Oh yeah? I'd like to see you try it." Before she and Kiba could step forward, Rias felt a hand on her shoulder and turned her head around to see Naruto looking at her firmly. "Rias, go help Akino-senpai and the others, leave him to me," he told her matter-of-factly, his tone booking no further argument. Despite having prepared for it, Rias still found herself looking at him with her eyes widened in surprise, something that she no longer did that often anymore. "Are you sure, Naruto-kun?" Kiba decided to ask. "Surely we can work together to take him down." "No, leave him to me, Kiba," Naruto told his confused comrade. "You and Rias go head the others and my champions. The sooner we bring that barrier down, the better." "Naruto." Rias bit her bottom lip and looked at her boyfriend unsurely for a second before saying finally, "All right, but you better win, got it?" "I will." Naruto nodded his head firmly before he turned his eyes back to Chow Chow, who did not make a single move as Rias and Kiba ran past him. It was after they had disappeared that he began, pointing his spear at the blonde. "You should have let them stay, Uzumaki. How foolish of you to think that you can take me on by yourself. Didn't I already kill two of your friends?" Naruto asked, narrowing his eyes at the leader of the hero faction. "A minor setback, nothing more. They underestimated your strength, but I will not make the same mistake." He then took a stance with his spear, the smirk on his face widening as 7 orbs appeared around him. "Good, 'cause I really don't want you to die too quickly," Naruto growled, before he summoned Yasuo and Yon's katana to block Chow Chow's thrust attack,
holding it firmly as he glared at the descendant of the wielder of true Longinus, which was said to be the strongest sacred gear in the world. Since I want to see which sacred gear is stronger, yours or mine. And with that said, Naruto pushed Cao Cao back and dashed to the side, running faster than the wind itself as he came at Cao Cao, who expertly spun his spear around and blocked the blonde strikes, but Naruto did not stop there and followed up with a series of fast sword slashes, sparks flying between them every time their weapon met. Nice technique, the leader of the hero faction said as he parried Naruto's steel blades, making the blonde take a step back to regain his footing before attacking him with a powerful slicing motion. Naruto, having fully anticipated this, instantly took a leap to avoid the holy spear, and then kicked Cao Cao in the face with so much force that the blonde sent him crashing into the same building Azazel had earlier. Nice nose, Naruto mocked as he switched the two katana with Set's metal gauntlets, fusing with the boss, and allowing a powerful demonic aura to flare around him. Cao Cao merely answered with a smirk as blood leaking down his nose, pushing himself up with Longinus stabbing into the ground. One of the orbs around him glowed, and a battalion of warriors draped in Chinese armors appeared around Cao Cao, holding up their weapons at Naruto. Relying on numbers won't help you, you know, Naruto stated firmly, and then the runes on his summoner jacket glowed. A large magic circle with him at its center spread out, covering the entire area in its crimson light as several figures appeared from it, standing side by side with their summoner with a strong and powerful aura about them. It appears that today we will have to put our differences aside, Garen. The feeling is mutual, General Darius. Oh, come on, do I really have to fight with you? Shut up, Draven, unless you want another broken nose. Well, not as broken as your blade, I bet. The glorious executioner mused at the exile warrior, before he started to look around before asking loudly, by the way, summoner, where's the fucking audience? Draven can't fight without an audience. But no one bothered to answer his question. It appears that the League of Legends will stand together today. Jarvan IV, the exemplar of Demacia, with Xin Zhao and Fiora standing at his side, their weapons drawn and ready to aid their summoner. It appears so, Prince Jarvan. LeBlanc said with a small smirk, as Katarina and Talon made the movements of sharpening their weapons, the red-haired assassin smiling a little at the prospect of fighting side by side with the might of Demacia. Zed, I didn't expect to see you here as well. Shin spoke calmly with his hands folding behind his back, glancing over to the man he once called his brother. Make sure to stay out of my way, Shin. The shadow assassin replied in his deep, grumbling voice. So, we meet once again, brother. Yon. Yasuo smiled at his older brother before the two both turned their attention to the warriors standing before them and the other champions of the league. You ready, Naruto? Jax asked as he stepped forward while holding the last light of Ikathia in his arm. At his side were Naruto's other masters, Master Ian Lee Sin, both of whom were more than ready to accompany him. The summoner smirked and nodded his head. Let's do this. For the league. Naruto bellowed and the champions of the league roared in response, immediately following their summoner as he charged at Cao Cao and his own warriors. The two sides clashed, and so the final battle of Reykjavik had begun. Or so they thought. Drake. Leonardo. A member of the hero faction cried out in shock as Leonardo, the possessor of Annihilation Maker, and the very creator of the anti-monsters, were grabbed by the throat and lifted into the air by a man dressed in black armor with a cape, with long brown hair that went to his hips with many bangs covering his right eye. As Shalba-sama. Having used up all of his strength creating that army of anti-monsters, Leonardo could barely struggle as Shalba held him above the ground, his hands gripping tightly into the man's wrist as he gasped to breathe. What do you want? The battle here is lost. Shalba said, a small smile on his face as he put his hand forward, but we can still give this world something to remember. With that said, a magic circle appeared in the palm of his hand. What are you doing? No, stop. No. Aha. Leonardo asked in horror as as he felt a strange sensation that spread across his whole body before crying out as his whole body was swallowed in a blinding white light, which soon covered the entire world itself. An earth-shaking roar was then heard, before a pair of gigantic monsters rose from the temporal headquarters of the hero faction.
Chapter 29. I must admit, Naruto Uzumaki, your power is most interesting.
Cao Cao said with a smirk as he and his warriors clashed against Naruto and his champions, who seemed to have no problem whatsoever dealing with the enemies despite being outnumbered 6-1.
Thanks, but no thanks. Naruto growled, and the ground underneath Cao Cao shattered as he used true Longinus to block a straight punch from him.
Despite this, Cao Cao didn't look too worried, taking a leap back to avoid a left hook from Naruto's other hand. After dodging, he attacked Naruto with a swift slash of his long spear, but Naruto blocked it with a defensive stance of having both arms raised in front of his face, using both of Set's sturdy metal bracers to stop the blade of the Spear of Destiny. Using the force Cao Cao had attacked him with as momentum, Naruto jumped to the side, the world around him blurring as he moved at super speed and disappeared into darkness, using Evelyn's ability to get behind Cao Cao, fist already moving back for a punch, but things didn't work out as he planned. Cao Cao spun around as though he had predicted what Naruto would do, parrying his attack with the blade of his Longinus, forcing the blonde to back off. Naruto glanced at the steam rising from the cut on his cheek from where Cao Cao had cut him with the tip of the Longinus. Even with Set's healing ability and endurance, the cut was closing up at a much slower rate than normal as pain seared into his flesh. The spear was said to be powerful enough to vaporize even ultimate-class devils, so Naruto knew very well his next mistake could very well cost him his life. The air around Naruto began to turn cold as he fused himself with Anivia, the Cryo Phoenix, making the cut on his cheek disappear almost instantly with the combined healing power of Set and an immortal Phoenix. The ground under his foot cracked as he shot toward Cao Cao, raising his left arm to block a swing from the leader of the hero faction, before throwing a punch at his face, only for Cao Cao to block it with the handle of his spear. Their fierce clash resulted in a series of powerful backlash of cutting winds flying across the battlefield, gouging into the ground and proving each other to be evenly matched, until suddenly one of the 7 orbs floating around his began to glow before Naruto felt his feet leaving the ground without his volition. His eyes widened as he flailed in the air before he was thrown toward a nearby building at neck-breaking speed, the force giving him barely enough to spin around in midair and landed with his feet, breaking the wall before he himself was sent crashing into the building. Cao Cao smirked, feeling satisfied with his attack, only to find himself widening his eyes when Naruto shot out with a pair of icy wings on his back, Starfire Spellblade in hand. Sparks flew between them as Cao Cao blocked Naruto's sword strike with his spear. This did not deter Naruto, and he continued with a series of Wuju swordsmanship, forcing Cao Cao to a defensive ground until Cao Cao parried his strike and thrust his spear toward the blonde's abdomen, forcing him to lean to the side to dodge. Cao Cao did not waste any time with his attack, and spun the shaft of his spear around to Naruto across his face, almost slamming him into the ground, but Naruto was quick to cover, leaping back before Cao Cao could land a direct hit on him by slashing his spear up, the tip grazing his chest by just a millimeter. In the air, Naruto split Starfire Spellblade into 2 and slashed, sending out a wave of divine fire at Cao Cao, only for one of the 7 orbs to appear in front of its master. When the wave of fire slammed into it, the orb glowed brightly, and the attack was suddenly redirected back toward him, forcing Naruto to immediately slam his foot down and push himself to the side to dodge it. Yo! Be careful there, kid! Draven, who was fighting right behind him, shouted as he was forced to crouch down to avoid the attack of divine fire, but the top of his hair was not so lucky, and it also made him fail to catch his spinning axes. That was not me, was all that Naruto could say to answer the glorious executioner, figuring that it must be one of those annoying abilities that Azazel had mentioned, before he quickly turned back to face Cao Cao, who smirked as he spun his spear around and unleashed several powerful holy blasts at him. Naruto ran and flipped to dodge, taking off and flying above Cao Cao to prevent those holy blasts from hitting his champions who might not notice, but it did not seem to be a problem. Noticing a slight opening, Naruto then shot down toward Cao Cao, who then stopped spinning his weapon and sent a barrage of lightning-fast thrusts at the blonde, his spear extending and retracting at even faster speed to reach Naruto, only for him to maneuver through it all, breaking the sound barrier as he increased his speed even further with one hand rearing back. But just when he was an inch away from delivering a satisfying punch to Cao Cao's face, another orb shone and the man in question completely disappeared, causing Naruto to slam into the ground, causing it to explode around them. Still, Naruto's reaction allowed him to land on his feet, but just enough time to parry an attack that came in from his left, causing the tip of true Longinus to finally break through his metal bracer and cut deep into his flesh. Grhhh. Grunting in pain, Naruto spun around and punched the spear away with his other hand, his whole body glowing brightly with yellow electricity due to the immense damage that he had just taken. The blast that he unleashed was powerful enough to break and then shatter the rings around the spear, but not the sacred gear itself, as Cao Cao spun it around to dissipate the force of Naruto's punch. I will admit, Naruto Uzumaki, that you are as strong as I have expected you to. Cao Cao said as Naruto got up. The smoke coming from his arm disappeared as his wound healed up. However, Naruto could feel a great amount of his demonic power had disappeared due to the holy power of true Longinus, but he refused to let it show on his face as he looked at Cao Cao, who pointed his spear at him. But I will be honest, I'm disappointed. How so? Naruto asked with a tone full of sarcasm. Cao Cao gave an amused chuckle before answering, spinning his spear around and placing it on his shoulder. When I heard you had enough power to drag Great Red out of the dimensional gap and allow the Ouroboros dragon to return to her home, I thought you were a monster and expected you to have the power to single-handedly defeat us all by yourself. True, you have killed Jean and George, but I do not believe that you can challenge Great Red at your current level of power. Why don't you summon Aurelian Soul and one-shot me with whatever power that you will acquire from it? Let's just say that I just want to beat the crap out of you, and then either give you over to a champion of mine who is specialized in torture, or stab you with your own fancy spear. Naruto answered with a growl, but Cao Cao merely smirked mockingly back in response before throwing an accusing finger at him. You want to know why? It's because of you and your shitty fucking group that the MSI is cancelled. Do you have any idea how long I have waited to watch a league tournament live? Cao Cao's sweat dropped, but then felt a chill running down his spine. But what pissed me off the most is that you think you can just show up randomly in front of me and threaten me, the people that I care about, and everyone in this beautiful city just like that. Naruto's tone then lowered as he gave Cao Cao a murderous glare. If you think I'm just going to kill you, Cao Cao, you are dead wrong. Scumbags like you cannot be allowed to continue to live in this world. And don't worry, I am not gonna make it quick. Big words coming from a dead man, Uzumaki. Cao Cao smirked as he lowered his spear down to take a fighting stance with it as he spun it down. Let's begin round 2 then. I will show you why you cannot. Promotion Bishop. But before he could even finish that statement or taking that stance he had intended to, Naruto had already appeared in front of him with a greenish aura of the Wuju Styles Highlander art radiating from his body, allowing him to move faster than he had ever been in his life, and slammed his elbow into his face, making Cao Cao turn his face with a painful, twisted expression before he was launched through an entire building. Crashing into the ground once, Cao Cao then flipped around to regain his footing, but found his eyes widening when he looked up and saw Naruto right in front of him, no longer wielding Starfire Spellblade or Set's metal bracers, leaving his bare fists to be covered in a mini lightning storm of the Stormbringer. The teleportation orb, Asuratana, instantly teleported him away before Naruto's lightning attack could come in contact with his body, allowing him to instantly appear behind the blonde with his spear ready to impale his chest. Due to the fact that they had moved to a location away from Naruto's champions and his warriors, Cao Cao did not see one of his summons disappearing from the fight, and it was none other than the Master of Shadow himself, Zed. With his ability, Naruto was able to release a shadowy figure of himself from his shadow, and swapped his place with it before Cao Cao could stab him, causing his spear to impale into the ground before the shadow itself punched him in the gut, mimicking the blonde's movement. Blood and saliva flew from Cao Cao's mouth as he coughed, having just to push himself out of the way before Naruto could attack him from behind.
You didn't think it was that easy for you, did you? You think I've been fighting you with my full strength? No, Chow Chow, I was just being cautious. Cautious?
Naruto asked, creating a metal, spinning shuriken of the Shadow Master, and threw it at Chow Chow, fully expecting him to return it with that redirecting ability of his. What he did not expect, however, was the fact that Naruto hit a smoke bomb in its shadow that detonated before the shuriken was sent back, covering the area Chow Chow in a constantly expanding cloud of smoke. I have figured out all 7 of your abilities, 5 of which you have shown me. Stealthily, the blonde ran around within the black smoke, using Evelyn's shade for extra measure, and rapidly threw Zed's shuriken at Chow Chow. Several of which he was able to parry, sent back or completely destroy with Hatharatana, the treasure that allowed him to destroy all weapons, but he could barely keep up with the speed that Naruto used to dash in and out the smoke and slash him with Zed's assassin blades, which were empowered by the use of Orn's power, increasing its damage even further with the divine fire of the Forge God. You can't use the last 2 of your abilities, can you? Or at least, you cannot use them against me. I don't know why, but I am not going to let you live long enough to figure it out. Enough. Losing his composure, Chow Chow spun his weapon around and slammed it into the ground, generating a dome of holy power that expanded outward and dispersed the cloud of smoke, but Naruto was not stupid enough to remain inside it. With Anivia's wings, he took off and shot into the air, where he summoned upon Chow Chow a storm of hail and lightning, seemingly giving him no time to breathe as he flew down and slammed his fist into his gut. Following him, Naruto grabbed Chow Chow's face mid-flight and slammed him through a wall of true ice that he had created just the second he was about to recover. The pain of Naruto's attacks were immeasurable, but Chow Chow bit the inside of his mouth and endured through it all. He then sent the Hatharatana orb, the one that allowed him to move anything that it touched, toward Naruto and removed the blonde from him, throwing him away before combining it with Asaratana, the horse treasure of teleportation, to send the blonde away as far as possible so he could have enough time to prepare for his next attack. 2 can play that game, Chow Chow. What he did not expect, however, was for Naruto to use Realm Warp, a rune spell that he had learnt from Rise, to teleport back, appearing from a portal on the ground in a flash of blue light before he hurled an orb of runic energy at Chow Chow, before rooting him in place with Rune Prison spell. Immobilized, Chow Chow was left at the mercy of Naruto's assault, only managing to break free when he was able to activate the strongest power of his balance breaker, Paranakaratana, a strong attack with so much destructive powers that people standing from far away could see it, covering the whole city in a brilliant flash of light. When the light vanished, Chow Chow was forced to impale his spear into the ground and leaned against it to keep himself standing, his shoulders heaving as sweat dripped from his forehead, having used almost everything that he had left. So that's your 6th ability. I gotta admit to you, Chow Chow, I am disappointed. Chow Chow then heard Naruto's voice, and was shocked to see Naruto emerging from a cloud of smoke unscratched, being protected by a barrier of strong winds that were being maintained by another champion of his. She was a beautiful woman whose snowy white hair was standing upward and moving as if was being blown by a strong gust of wind as she floated above the ground beside her summoner, wearing a scanty set of outfits that were matched the color of her, and left very little of her voluptuous body to the imagination. With a wave of her glowing blue staff, Naruto emerged with an ethereal glow to his arms from the elbows down, holding in his right hand a hammer that were generating powerful bolts of lightning that struck and destroyed the ground and building around him, similar to that of the hammer of Thor, Mjolnir, but for those who knew about League and its skins, it was none other than the hammer of Thunder Lord Orn, given meaning by multiverse transcendence. Since we are in Iceland, the land of the Norse gods, let's finish it with something that's inspirited by one of their mightiest deities. Spinning the lightning hammer, Naruto then shot forward at speed even greater than before with the aid of Janna's magic, surpassing the speed the leader of the hero faction could keep up with as he left a trail of wind and blue lightning behind him. Chow Chow could only follow his warrior instinct and created a holy barrier around him to protect himself before swinging his spear blindly at Naruto, only for the blonde to swiftly dodge to the side before he swung around and smashed the lightning hammer across his face, breaking through his holy barrier and sending him flying through several buildings with a thunderous sound and a blinding explosion of lightning. Before Chow Chow could even regain his balance,
blood dripping down the side of his face, he heard another thunderous strike before the ground underneath him split and lightning shot out from the gap, striking him in the chest before he was smashed through another building by a giant lightning goat. Naruto's assault did not stop there, however, as he appeared in front of Cao Cao in a whirlwind of lightning and kicked him in the face with a spinning kick. The blonde then followed up with a left hook, his fist crackling with the same electricity of his hammer. Cao Cao tried to block it, only for Naruto to stop his fist suddenly, and swung his hammer up, smashing him in the chin and sending him into the air. Because the blow was far less devastating than the previous one, the leader of the hero faction was able to recover and forced Naruto back with a wild swing of his spear, which Naruto blocked with the side of his hammer. An explosion of lightning and holy power shook the area, but Naruto stood his ground firmly and attacked Cao Cao with a series of powerful, devastating blows, sending out shockwave after shockwave when their weapons met. Cao Cao was able to block Naruto's hammer strikes, but by putting his all into doing so his other fist wasn't something that he could easily follow, and so he was punched repeatedly in the face, chest and stomach. Using Kahabati Retana, Cao Cao created more warriors to his aid, only for the blonde to immediately destroy them with his hammer strikes. When Naruto came at him again, Cao Cao was forced to use one of his warriors as a shield, but Naruto simply smashed right through it and continued to bring his lightning hammer down upon Cao Cao, who raised his spear above his head to block it, but he was still forced onto his knee. And then suddenly, crack! Cao Cao was utterly speechless, the words dying in his throat as he could only stare at the crack that had appeared on the shaft of his spear. The possessor of true Longinus only had enough time to contemplate what this meant before he forced himself to dodge Naruto's attacks instead of using his spear to block them, realizing whatever that hammer the blonde was wielding, it had the ability strong enough to break down his sacred gear. Naruto, meanwhile, did not let him off the hook that easily, attacking where the spear was to force Cao Cao to block it even if he did not want to, increasing the strength of his hammer strikes each time, sending out arcs of lightning that carved into the ground. Although he had reached the point where he had started feeling extremely exhausted and tired, knowing that he was dangerously close to his limit and about to run out of power, Naruto refused to slow down and continued to attack almost blindly, even losing all forms of techniques as he smashed Cao Cao's spear with everything he got with Thunder Lord Orn's hammer. It was only thanks to the empowered champion's tankiness and endurance that he could continue to fight, but the devil side of him was still severely damaged by true Longinus. Due to the lack of fineness in his movements, Cao Cao was able to do a number of counterattacks, cutting his arms and thighs with the blade of his spear, but still he failed to deliver a fatal blow as he too had reached his limit, and so Naruto continued to push forward until eventually. With a wild swing of his hammer, Cao Cao was left standing with the two broken pieces of true Longinus, his hands shaking as he realized what just happened. In blind rage he tried to attack Naruto, only for the blonde to leave his hammer on the ground and jump to send his foot into his face, before elbowing his left hand and causing him to drop the upper half of what was left of true Longinus. Then he continued with a rabbit punch Cao Cao's right forearm, making him drop the lower half of Longinus. Before it could touch the ground, Naruto kicked it up and grabbed it in midair to stab the broken, pointy tip into Cao Cao's chest. Gurg. Cao Cao gritted his teeth in pain as blood leaked down his chin from his mouth. Both of his hands shot up and held onto the shaft, preventing Naruto from pushing it even further into his chest. The two glared intensely at each other as Naruto used every little bit of strength that he had left to push until Cao Cao was on his knee, and then called for his weapon, making it fly into his hand just as Rias and the others destroyed the last barrier device, allowing a bolt of lightning to go through and strike the hammer when Naruto brought it above his head. This end now. With a battle cry, Naruto swung his hammer down the pole's end, bringing a tremendous power upon Cao Cao and sending the spear through his chest, at the same time electrocuting him and causing him to howl in pain. His painful cry could be heard from every corner of the battlefield as the broken shaft shot out of his back and stabbed itself into the ground. Having used up everything that he had, the lightning hammer then disappeared and Naruto was reverted back to his normal form as Thunder Lord Orn lost its meaning and the living forge himself unmerged from him. He fell onto his hands and knees,
trying to catch his breath as blood trickled down from the smoking wounds on his body. Cao Cao, meanwhile, could only utter a weak whimper as he stared up at the sky before his hands fell to the side, his head rolling back, and died. Impossible. Standing on the sky with his scythe in hand, Pluto could only utter in shock as the leader of the hero faction took his last breath, with one half of True Longinus lying broken on the ground and the other half being impaled through his chest, still crackling with arcs of lightning as his corpse down. Well shit, the kid actually did it. Hovering in the air in front of him, Azazel Wolf whistled in amazement, having watched the entire battle from above while fighting Pluto, making sure that the Grim Reaper would not interfere with the fight below. Now, shall we finish this? He then turned his attention back at Pluto, who was still looking at Naruto down on the ground, and it only took him half a second to realize his attention. No longer having that playful expression on his face, Azazel immediately went after Pluto, who shot down and aimed at Naruto, having realized that the blonde was far too dangerous to be left alive. Naruto, who was trying to catch his breath, didn't see the Grim Reaper coming at him with his scythe already rearing back for a slashing strike, only looking up when he heard Azazel's voice. Naruto! Move! However, it was far too late for him to do anything. But just the second before the scythe could reach him, a figure clad in a purple hood and outfit jumped down in front of him, and used his weapon, a not-so-normal lamp, to block the deadly weapon, causing sparks to fly between them. Jax, the Grandmaster at Arms, stared fearlessly into Pluto's eyes from behind his glowing lens, and then knocked the Grim Reaper back with a wild swing of his lamp, allowing Shen and Master Yi to jump into the battle, forcing Pluto back with their swords. The Grim Reaper was then hit by a discordant wave of sound, before Lee Sin dashed to him and kicked him in the face with a Dragon's Rage kick, leaving a crack on his clown mask before he was sent tumbling on the ground. Spinning around, his scythe carved into the ground as he stabbed it down to stop himself, glaring at the four masters of Runeterra as they stood protectively in front of their summoner and student. "It's over, Pluto," Azazel said as he flew down and stood next to Jax, his voice calm. "Go run back to your master before I decided Hades himself had something to do with Chaos Brigade. You guys lost. This battle is over." "Is it?" Pluto replied, making Azazel cock an eyebrow before darkness wrapped around his body, and took him away, leaving the advisor of the Occult Research Club look on warily. Behind him, Naruto finally allowed himself to let out a sigh of relief, before his face landed on the ground as he finally passed out. Just before he lost consciousness, however, he saw a blinding light that seemed to swallow the world whole. Drake! Ha! Naruto woke up to find himself lying on his back. Up above him lay a blurry well of darkness. He couldn't tell if he was inside of a building or not, but he could feel a soft surface underneath him, and it was too hard to be a bed, but it was very close. "Ah, you are awake." Naruto then heard a familiar voice, and looked up to see Opha staring at him from her seat beside the bed. In her hand was a gaming console that definitely belonged to Gasper. Ophis, Wadash. Before Naruto could finish that question, he was shocked to the core by an earth-shaking roar, which did not seem to affect Ophis in the slightest as she stared at him. Once it was over, Naruto got up, almost tripping over because he had yet to regain his full strength, but wasted no time to pick himself up and run out of what appeared to be an infirmary as Ophis jumped off of her seat and followed him. The person that he almost bumped into was none other than Akino Himejima herself, who had a worried look on her beautiful face as she tried to walk into his tent. Seeing Naruto, Akino widened her eyes in surprise, before she threw her arms around his neck and hugged him, calling out his name in relief. "Naruto-kun. You are awake. Akino-senpai." Naruto smiled, but before he could say anything else to her, another roar was heard, and this time it was followed by a series of rumbling explosions, causing Naruto to almost lose his footing, but Akino immediately held him back in her arms, making Naruto look at her gratefully before asking worriedly, "Thanks, senpai. What's going on? Did we win?" He remembered killing Cao Cao, but everything that happened after that was a mystery to him. "We won, Naruto-kun." Akino answered him, "We won, but the battle is not yet over." Naruto could only widen his eyes at that.
With Ofus following them, Akino then took him to the meeting room, making him realize that they were in Lagerdalshul Sports Center.
On the way there, Naruto met with several of their friends, who were all happy to see him back on his feet, but because of the current situation, he decided to not stay and talk with them for too long, making his way to the meeting room with Akino's help. Unlike before, beside Azazel and the Rookie Four, there were some other people in the room with them. Two of them he recognized, being none other than Surzex Lucifer and Seraphol Leviathan. One of the people that he could not recognize was an elderly man with long, gray hair and a matching beard. He wore a gold and white monocle over his left eye, without the addition of the chain, and on his body a robe, which was short and blue with a gold lining on the top and bottom of the collar. He also wore a golden and black hat, which was sectioned off into 5 mini-sections with different colors. Standing beside him was a beautiful young woman with long, straight silver hair and aqua-colored eyes who appeared to be in her late teens. Her attire was a full set of armor, which consisted of a white breastplate with gold and pale blue accents and matching, fingerless gauntlets, boots, hip guards, and wing-shaped hair clips. She also wore a black leotard underneath her armors, black thigh-high stockings, and a pale blue cloth wrapped underneath her hip guards, all of which were clad with pink lacing.
When Naruto entered the room, all eyes immediately landed on him.
Ah, the young man of the hour. The old man spoke up as Rias walked to his side with a relieved smile, and helped him to the main table.
Amazing fight with the descendant of that Chinese warlord Cao Cao.
My son really loved what you did with your hammer, by the way. He liked you so much that he decided to give you a little help with that bolt of lightning.
Your son? Naruto asked in confusion as he came to stand at the bed, before it hit him and made him widen his eyes in realization. You mean Thor? Does that mean you are Odin?
No, I am Frigga. The old man said with a small smirk, making the young woman standing at his side cough softly into her hand. Of course I am Odin, brat.
Sorry.
Naruto replied with a deadpan expression, his tone contrary to the word that he said.
Ha, absolutely no respect for authority, but I like it.
It seems you are more like my son than just that whole hammer-swinging thing. Odin chuckled as he crossed his arms on his chest.
Surzex-sama, Seraphol-sama.
Naruto spoke to the two leaders of the devil faction respectfully, making Odin snap his head back to glare at him while the Valkyrie, Naruto assumed, did her best to hide her smile behind her hand. What's going on out there?
See for yourself, Naruto-kun.
Surzex said and then activated a magic circle on the table, showing the image of a gigantic, 150-foot-tall monster with a long neck and a monstrous face, with wings sprouting from its back. It had scales covering its entire body, and 4 massive claws attached to its long fingers looked sharp enough to slice through steel. A long tail jutted from its hind end, and bird-like legs with dinosaur feet finished the creature's appearance. But it was not the only one. Surzex waved his hand above the magic circle and switched the scene to another, even more terrifying-looking monster, which had to be at least 200 meters tall, towering over every building in the area. Its angry roar rolled like a nuclear blast. Other smaller forms darted toward it, circling the gigantic monster. Naruto saw flashes of light, and realized a small army of devils and Valkyrie clad in armor similar to the one beside Odin and riding on winged horses was trying to fight it, but there was little that they could do to the giant monster as it continued to march on alongside its smaller, but no less terrifying brother. Those two monsters appeared soon after you defeated Cao Cao. Azazel explained. Bandersnatch and Jabberwocky are what we are calling them, and from the information we have been able to gather from the captured members of the hero faction, it seemed to be the balance breaker of Annihilation Maker's possessor. Those are anti-monsters at their finest, created and built to fight against every being in this world.
No, not everything. Naruto shook his head, making everyone in the room look at him.
He could understand why everyone was having so much trouble fighting those two monsters, because they were anti-monsters. But just like the smaller ones that he had fought, his champions were the answer, as they were beings who came from another world.
You have already done enough, Naruto-kun.
Surzek shook his head and said defeating a leader of the enemies is no small feat, and your power is already running too low to allow you to continue fighting. Also, there's a reason why we asked Rias and the others to stay here. His tone softened as Naruto looked around the room and saw the look on Serord and the heiresses' faces, realizing how much they wanted to be out there and fight those monsters are unlike anything we have ever seen. It is dangerous out there. But I can't just sit here and let those monsters rampage around either, Surzek-sama, when I have the power to take them down right here. Naruto argued as he raised his hand up and showed Surzek the glowing runes of Summoner on the sleeve of his jacket. Although, it was glowing very weakly, showing the exhausted state of his demonic reserve. Sona Kaicho, can you ask Issei to transfer some of his power to me? Sona nodded, I can, Uzumaki-kun, but I don't think it will be enough. It's good enough. Naruto shook his head and said firmly, already making his choice in his mind. Aurelian Soul was not an option, since he did not want to bring more problems to his world, and there's also no time for arguing with that overgrown space dog to enlist his help. On the other hand, he could summon either Malphite or Nautilus at their full sizes to assist the battle against those monsters, but he really didn't know if the living monolith or the Titan of the depths alone was enough. Worst-case scenarios, he would have to use his balance breaker, but I can give you my power. Ophis suddenly spoke up, making everyone turn their heads to look at her in surprise. If power is all that you need to summon, then it won't be a problem. I can lend you some. No one dared to question her, even Naruto. From what Azazel had told him, her power was infinite, so even if she lent him just a tiny little fraction of her power, he probably could even summon Aurelian Soul. You will really help us, Ophis-sama? Was the only thing that Seraphol could ask the mighty dragon god. Yeah, I will help Naruto. Why not? Ophis asked with a shrug, asking as if it was already so obvious. Why didn't you offer your help before? Naruto couldn't help but ask and then quickly added, if you don't mind me asking. Were you needing my help before? Plus, you never asked. Point taken. Naruto said with an amused chuckle. Right, so that's one problem solved. Azazel nodded his head and then continued, but who are you going to summon, Naruto? Aurelian Soul? With him I believe I can defeat those two monsters by myself, but... Naruto then paused, as he noticed something poking out of Sekvera's skirt pocket, the upper body of what seemed to be a Gunpla, a Gundam action figure, which was very popular among mecha anime fans and model enthusiasts in Japan. What was it doing there inside the pocket of a cold and serious, no-nonsense young woman like her was beyond him, but she didn't notice that it was almost falling out. Sekvera-san, can I borrow that? Naruto requested, pointing his hand at the toy. Ha! The Agar's heiress raised an eyebrow in surprise, before she followed Naruto's finger and looked down to see the Gundam action figure sticking out of her skirt's pocket. Sure, but what for? She asked, and took the toy out of her to hand it over to Naruto. I think I know what I am going to summon. Naruto said as he looked at the toy in his hand before he lowered it down the table, and looked at every devil around him, but I'm gonna need everyone's help defeating those two monsters. Would you like to enlighten us, Naruto-kun? Surzek asked, looking at the blonde in interest. Has anyone watched a movie called Pacific Rim? He asked and raised an eyebrow when he saw Sekvera just literally thrusting her hand into the air, an excited and gleeful look on her face that he absolutely did not expect her to have. Azazel soon followed, albeit a little slower before a couple more hands were raised. What about the sequel? To his surprise, everyone lowered their hands down. Everyone but Sekvera Agars. Is she a mecha otaku or something? He couldn't help but wonder with a sweat drop. That really ruined her serious image to him, but then again, his girlfriend was an otaku and a Japanophile. Plus, Naruto couldn't help but think it's kinda cute and made her less scary. Okay, so here's what we are going to do. Naruto said and then put the Gundam toy in front of the images of Bandersnatch and Jabberwocky. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions.
Looking forward to having you on board again.